Okay, everyone, let's call to order today's Special Ways and Means Committee meeting of Tuesday, November 1st, 2022. Please remember that this meeting is being live streamed. For those in the public who would like to, it's available at www.orangecountygov.com. Click on the tab for the legislature and locate this meeting today in the calendar. Please remember the microphones are sensitive. And please silence your phones or tablets or anything, put them on vibrate or whatever, so that we're not interrupted and extraneous conversations are not recorded. So at this time, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Doreen, roll call, please.
Anagnostakis.
Present.
Brescia.
Here.
O'Donnell.
Here.
Hines.
Here.
Hotel. Here. Paduk.
Here.
Cheney.
Here.
Benton.
Here.
All present.
All present and accounted for. Okay. Just a technical question that people who are watching on video stream will also be able to see the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so first up, O'Connor Davies to make their presentation on their review of the proposed executive recommended budget for 2023. Nick, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Benton and legislators. My name is Nicholas DeSantis. I'm a partner with the firm of PKF O'Connor Davies. And to my right is my partner, Chris Cobb. And we also have one of our budget analysts, Samantha Nardo here, who's going to be advancing the PowerPoint presentation on the screen. Each of you should have in front of you a spiral bound report from our firm, as well as a PowerPoint presentation. And of course, you have the county executive's proposed budget. So you have three documents, and at times we may be referring to each of those documents. As you are probably aware, the 2023 budget proposed by the county executive is $896.3 million. It's an increase of $66 million above the adopted budget for the current year. One of the largest increases in the budget is $40 million in the contractual category. 20 million of it is from the increased estimate from sales tax that would be shared with your local municipalities as compared to the current year adopted budget. There's also an increase of 3 million in contingency, 3 million in DSS, and 4 million in the health department in the contractual lines. The budget provides for funding for 2,475 positions, and the budget is funded with a property tax of 126.5 million, which is a decrease of 7.6 million or 5.67% as compared to the adopted budget for the current year. Sales tax is estimated at 290 million, net of 104 million that you'll be sharing with your local districts, with your local municipalities. The budget does rely upon some fund balance. Fund balance from Valley View of about 13.8, the county road 2 million, sanitary landfill 600,000, but no fund balance is proposed to be used from the general fund.
Nick, can I have a question? You're giving a lot of statistics, but only one slide.
Yeah, what I'm giving you is an overview
Okay.
of what's contained in these three booklets, including the county executive's budget message.
Okay.
The budget does not intend to use any American Rescue Plan Act funds, federal funds, to subsidize the budget. The property tax is within the property tax cap. As I said, there's no monies appropriated from the general fund. Property tax is supporting 5 million in contingency funds. There's 5 million earmarked for various reserves. There's a 2 million property tax overlay, and there's 6.85 million as a contribution to the capital fund. So with that said, we can move forward with the next slide, Samantha. And each of you can see in page 4 what the property tax is as a comparison to your adopted budget for 2022. And you can see that property tax makes up in Orange County approximately 16% of the appropriation required for 2022. We're going to jump now to page 8. And we're going to talk about one of the largest revenue streams supporting the expense budget. Chris?
Sure. So on this slide, you can see that your adopted budget was 234.82 million. Currently, you've already collected $262 million. So your sales tax, obviously, very robust. Last year, when you planned your budget, as we talked last year, you were coming out of the pandemic. We didn't know which way the economy was going. So you took a very conservative approach to the sales tax. And what we're projecting this year in the second column is a range of between 277.3 and 284. The range is based on if we had no increase compared to last year for the rest of the balance of the year, or if you continue growing at the 8% you're growing at this year. So this year you've been currently growing at 8%, but you've also, if you remember, you did do the gas tax holiday. So we took that into account. I think the impact on that is approximately 3 million of county share, 4 million overall, about a million, 25% roughly, 26% of shares. So we took that into account. And so you'll come in, it looks like you'll come in with 42 million or 49 million over your adopted budget. When you moved into the new year, you obviously saw where your collections fell with the pandemic ending. You've raised your budget up to about $290 million. And we're projecting for this year around a range between 285 and 292. Again, using a 0% growth and then using roughly a 3% growth, which is where the prediction is for the national growth in domestic product. So with keeping that in mind, you'll either be 4.38 million unfavorable or 2.58 favorable. And as Nick will explain to you later, when we get to the conclusion, you do have enough funds to cover the possibility of coming up short in other accounts.
Okay,
Quick question. You said 0% growth to some other growth, but you're at 285.62 million as opposed to 290. So you're a little bit of a minus growth on the low end. Am I wrong on that?
So 290 is your budget.
That's
Our projection maximum is 284, and we put back in the gas tax.
Okay.
Remember, you had the exemption through December?
Yeah.
So we reinstituted it for
Oh, that
January.
includes the gas tax going back in.
Yes. So that's why it looks a little higher than our projection, because we factored back in the collection on the
Thank you.
gas.
Is that recommended by the executive to put that back in?
I think it's sunsets December 31st based on your
Right.
the resolution.
Yeah, if you pass.
But you didn't factor in the legislature.
No.
Continue.
no, this is just their opinion.
Right.
Right.
Well,
This
it's
is
not our
math-
opinion, it's just what's
It
there
should be done.
now.
Right.
Since that law sunsets,
Mhm.
we took it into consideration that it would go back.
On the next slide,
Mr. O'Donnell had a question.
On the gas tax, so how did you come up with that figure?
the budget department basically provided it to us because we're not allowed to see the data, only, you guys are. So
Can you state those figures again?
roughly, I think the overall reduction is 4 million, of which 3 million falls against your share and 1 million against the amount shared with the municipalities.
Right.
In round numbers.
Budget, how did you get that number?
So those were basically some of the numbers that I gave you at the pre-month when I did this in July. I did include a 4-month projection, and that's basically what.
So 4-month projection for October, November, December is 3 million we lose and $1 million all the municipalities lose. And that's based on what?
That was based on just some gasoline total data that I received of the New York State sales tax.
For the month of September?
No. This is a lagging indicator. It was probably from April, March through June, I believe it was, March through June.
And then you just calculated.
I just calculated it based on totals and and we allocated it out that way.
Okay, so it's a yes.
Yes.
This is a $896 million yes, the whole budget.
We didn't forgive everything.
Got to be truthful.
Right. And just to keep in mind for 2022, when you adopted the budget, you anticipated 84 million that you would share with the local municipalities. And that number will probably range somewhere between 99 and 102 million by the time the year is ended.
Mhm.
So you're sharing at least another 15 to 17 million more than local municipalities would have expected when you adopted the budget. And again, the same goes, the higher figure goes for 2023. More money is going to be distributed if and when you pass the budget.
And this slide, again, just gives a comparison to you and some of your neighboring counties as to how much sales tax makes up of your budget. You can see the average is 34, you're 38, so you're slightly more dependent on sales tax than some other, the other counties in the area. Next slide is the hotel tax. Again.
Can we go back to that for a second?
Sure.
We're slightly more dependent, but we far outrank any other local county in sales tax that
collection,
is
yeah.
collected.
Yes.
You have
Thank
a
you.
larger budget than some of the smaller counties.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which makes you susceptible to changes in the economic conditions in the region or nationwide. But then again, when things are robust and going well, you collect a lot of money, which helps offset your need for property taxes
Mhm.
on your constituents.
All right, the next slide is your hotel tax. Again, you're going to hear a common theme from me when we talk about 22. Last year, when you put the budget together, a lot of places still weren't open. A lot of places had restrictions on use. So when you adopted your budget, you stayed again very conservative at 4.25 million. But currently, it looks like you're going to come in around 6.82 million, about 2.5 better than budget. When you put your 2023 budget together, you came in at about 6.66 million. We left it basically flat with last year. You do have a bunch of hotels that may open up during 23, but again, given some supply chain issues and some delays in construction, again, we didn't factor in any increase based on those. They open up in the fourth quarter, you could get some extra revenue. Even that being said, we're about 160,000 higher than the favorable compared to the executive budget. The next slide is your interest and penalties on real property taxes. Again, you budgeted about 7 million, which is consistent with prior years. You're collecting about 6.73, which is slightly below the anticipated budget. But the good news for that is the reason you're slightly below is your collections on the property tax are above normal. You've held roughly 3 auctions as the economy has picked up steam a little bit and people rely less on programs. They've paid their back taxes. But the good news is your taxpayers have paid some of the back taxes. The bad news, if you want to look at it as bad news, is you did come in slightly under budget on your interest and penalties. Again, recognizing that, the executive put 3 million in the recommended budget, and we dropped it a little bit less at 6.65. Again, about $250,000 less because we looked at the receivable balances over the last few years, and you're at one of your lowest levels of receivables.
Well, now with this interest and penalties, though, if people are paying less interest and penalties, it means that they're doing better, because if you can't pay
Yes.
your taxes, you can't pay the interest and penalties.
Right.
either.
Correct. And your receivable is down, which means that people have gotten rid of some of the older receivables and are getting more current. So that's what I said. The good news is people are able to pay.
Right.
The next slide is your interest income. This is the money that you get on your deposits, and you can see that when the budget was put together, it was $250,000. We're projecting that you're going to hit 2.74 million. A lot of that is the result of 2 things. One is the ARPA money that came in. You have roughly $75 million of ARPA money that came in. And on top of that, interest rates, as we know, have been steadily rising as the Feds increase the rates consistently over the year. So you've been able to get some CDs with higher interest rates than anticipated. So it looks like you're going to come in close to 2.5 million in favorable variance. Again, the recommended budget did increase that to 2.17. We think it's going to come in around 3.28 based on the volume of cash that you have on hand and the fact that the interest rates have gone up again So you'll see another increase in the CD rates that you receive.
And they're not using any.
Mike A.
Right.
Thank you. So I'm being told that, that the date on this page is not correct because I guess it wasn't given correct. We were told it was 2.5 million of interest that, the recommended budget is going to have. And you've got 2.17 million, and I was told that that number is not correct. The 2.5 million is correct?
So basically, we had gotten a projection of 2.5. I had put in a placeholder of 1 million in one of the accounts. So the budget is $2.1 million. I probably could have raised it up, but
So the budget is not 2.5 million, it's 2.17
that's
million.
correct.
So what we were told last week is not what the number is.
No,
This
no,
is the number?
No. So the projection, I could have raised it to 2.5. I had put in a placeholder looking for another number, and I obviously did not increase it by the other 400,000.
Okay, so the number that we're dealing with in next year's budget is 2.17 million.
Yes,
Okay, question for the accountant. So you've come up with 1.11 million variance on the upside, and you're, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to figure out your methodology, because we went back and forth with many questions in committee last week. You're taking the amount of money that they invested, and you're saying the interest rates are slightly higher. We were told that the projection was about 2.6% interest on roughly something under $100 million. And based on you getting an extra million, you're probably thinking the rate is probably 1% higher than what they were thinking. That's how you're coming up with an
Yes.
additional amount of 1 million?
That's part of it, but also, from the time, I guess, that they did their projection to now, I think there's an expectation that the surplus that's going to occur in the 2022 budget is going to be a bit higher. So there's more fund balance available to invest. And as I indicated when I did my intro, there is no appropriation of general fund balance to balance this budget.
Right. So all the fund balance should be earning some interest for us.
It should all be working for you.
It should all be working for us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rob. Kevin, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask, when you did your projection, how much money did you think we had? You used 100 million in your projection?
No, I think we used more like 150. Off the top of my head, I don't
At what
remember. Whatever your current CD rates were. We did not raise the rates above what you just, while we were here, put out for CDs, because we're not going to project interest rates rising at half a point, so we used the current rates against that now.
So really, there's about 280 million that would be earning interest.
It could be as well.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's probably closer to 3.8 or 4%, I would think, but
Well, I think the ARPA money you're probably going to start spending, right?
We have
not
to.
as fast as, not in 2023, I don't think, no, because of all the design. I mean, maybe towards the end of the year,
Yeah.
but not 76.
Right, so if you don't
Well, this is
spend all
a
the
conservative,
ARPA
this is a
money,
conservative projection.
Yeah, very.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very, okay.
Terry, what would be our interest CD rate
At what time are we going?
that he was
The
just
last
talking about?
one that, that we just got, it was like 3.4, that was in October, a 30-day.
Yeah, but
No,
back
but
when
the
they
one-
were doing it.
Right.
When they were doing it, you were probably about 2.83, yeah, 2.8 to 3.
Okay,
And what, can I ask what date that was roughly?
had to be August,
When you guys are here. Chris,
That was about 3 or 4 weeks ago,
August, September.
probably mid, yeah,
the
probably
rates
mid-September.
So CD would have been mid-September at about just under 3%?
Yes.
And last week we got 3.4 on a 30-day.
And October, 3.4. Satisfied, Mike?
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay?
All right, so the next slide is your gain on sale of tax acquired property. So again, as I indicated, that you did have 3 auctions this year, and the good news was that a lot of individuals, to avoid the auction, come in and pay their taxes. But you budgeted $750,000. You did receive 2.93 million, so about $2 million favorable variance in this account. And again, you left $750,000 in the 23 budget. Again, we don't like putting a revenue source in for this because you don't know what you're going to sell, but we'll agree with it. But you do, just so you know, have about 130 parcels that are available, that are on the roll now that could be auctioned that are in the timeframe. So you do have parcels to support the $750,000. And again, I know you hope that it doesn't come to that they come in and pay their taxes. The next page is the sale of real property. This is the Quarry Road property that you have. It's been in the budget the past few years and you haven't been able to close on it. So in 22, you budgeted $1.25 million, you didn't receive it. And in the 23 budget, you put in 1.13 million. And again, we're recommending that you don't budget it since it's been there a couple of years before and we haven't been able to.
Well, we haven't even been able to sell it, not alone close, because the RFP didn't go out.
Okay. So we feel it's prudent not to budget this revenue, and given that you haven't been able to achieve it in the past. The next slide is your deferred tax overlay. As Nick indicated in his intro, you do budget $2 million for the overlay. The reason for the overlay is because we know all taxpayers don't come in January 1st to pay their taxes. Plus, during the course of the year, you do advance the money to the schools and the other municipalities. So you put in $2 million so that you have enough cash to operate at the county level. Now, the good news is, as we said, your property taxes receivable came down this year. So you actually have a positive variance at 3.41 million on this account. So you actually achieved $5 million more than you anticipated. You budgeted for 2 and you didn't need it, and you collected 3.41 of old taxes, leaving you a $5 million favorable variance. So as your property tax receivable comes down, that comes off your deferred taxes.
Yeah, the overlay is for cash flow purposes.
And the overlay is the accounting of it.
Yeah, because we need that money to reimburse the towns, because that's just the system that we have.
Right, because, and plus that not everybody pays their current year taxes right away. All right, and again, you put $2 million in the budget for the 23. Next, the county clerk fees, not much to talk about here. They are coming in about $130,000 favorable. Most of that is related to mortgage transactions, as we know that the summer and fall were pretty robust for sales of property, all around the area. So you did come in as favorable variance of 130,000. And you can see that in the 23 budget, they did recognize that they are collecting a little more than anticipated. We were told there's no fee increases proposed in the budget on this line. So we're going to agree with the number they put in the budget.
And the mortgage and deed reporting makes up about 30% of the revenue that the county clerk takes in. And recent reports have indicated that, real estate sales are kind of stalling a bit. There's a high mortgage rates.
Gotta expect that.
The next slide is your tobacco settlement. And again, you came in about $1 million favorable variance on the tobacco settlement. This is the money that you get based on the master settlement agreement, the lawsuit that was settled with all the states from the, I believe it was the big 6 tobacco companies at the time. And again, so for 2022, you budgeted 3.4, you collected 4.4, so $1 million better than you anticipated. There's no way really to see where this is going because you don't really get much information from the state. But you did put 3.8 million in the budget. We did go on the state website and their estimate is 4.22, so that's what we used. So about $420,000 more than is in the budget.
That was a good decision we made way back when, not to collateralize it and take payments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, Mr. Badoo, Mr. Gresham, we were the 3 that were here. Well, you on the other side.
One of the few counties in the Hudson Valley that did take that. Yeah.
The next slide is your pilots, your payment of little taxes. We looked at the agreements and bottom line is you budgeted for the agreements you have. If you do come in over budget, it's just because you've enticed somebody new to come into your community. So they gave us a list of the agreements and they come to roughly $2 million. So we agree with that.
And just so for your information, and it's written in the spiral book, Legoland is going up 60,000, Matrix is going up 40,000, Walden 20,000, Westcon 16,000, but IBM is coming down 128. That's why there's only a slight increase between the adopted budget and the projection to the proposed budget. And again, that's written up in the write-up on the plan.
Mr. O'Donnell.
So IBM is explained in the book.
It just
IBM is
indicates
saying
it
that the
expired.
pilot is over. Yeah. but now they're on full property tax levy.
And the other.
So one part loses, but the main budget.
Well, it loses in that revenue category.
Right.
Now they're on full property tax levy.
Mhm.
On the,
Now it shifts.
either run.
Right, now it just shifts to property tax.
Correct.
All right, the next line is jail revenues. I know you probably had a few conversations about this. This is the money that you receive mostly from the federal government for housing the ICE prisoners and for the federal marshal prisoners. And in the past, you've averaged about 400 individuals incarcerated in the facility. Your 22 average is down to 353 individuals and dropping. And most of that is due to the fact that in June or July, the federal marshals pulled out their prisoners and ICE reduced their prisoners and shifted them to lower cost facilities down south. So now that you have less people to get reimbursed for, you're going to come in under budget by about $3.39 million on this line. And you can see that the county recognized that and lowered the estimate down to 5.85. And again, based on the reduced census and no federal marshal prisoners, we're projecting like 4.88. So almost $1 million unfavorable variance.
On page 24 of the spiral book, you can see the grid that shows the prisoner population.
You,
Go ahead, Mr. Brush.
do you do a correlation with overtime being cut back in that regard as well, or you don't even look at that?
Well, I think there are some issues that we did bring up to budget. With respect to the substantial drop in the prisoner inmate population and the fact that you had, when we did the review, there were 33 vacancies and the posts were still being covered with overtime. So I think somewhere in our write-up, we recommend that you probably should engage in services of a consultant to look and see whether there's a more efficient way of scheduling those posts with the decrease in the prisoner population. And I know you also have to get approval from the State Division of Criminal Justice for what you do, but nevertheless, there seems to be some sort of disconnect between the population, the correctional officers, and the fact that the overtime is still necessary. The good thing is that the overtime is, and most of the overtime is being offset by the salaries from the vacancies.
Still, it's better than. Lame duck to get him last few months.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
The next slide is your casino revenues. As you can see, we dropped to 1.8, but based on the current payments, it looks like you might receive as high as 2.5 million, 2.51 million. I think the increase is basically based on the fact that, they're more open, less restrictions on the number of people at tables, and we added sports gambling,
Sports betting.
and we added online. So, hopefully between those, you can get the revenues back to where you probably anticipated when the casino was first proposed.
Did you have the Newburgh facility too? Newburgh one? You're not that?
No.
That's gonna be online this year, is it not, I believe?
It's supposed to open near the end of the year, I believe.
Something should be-
Yeah.
Good. So the budget also noticed that it was going up, so they put in 2.4. We don't know how much more it's going to grow, so we left ours relatively flat year over year because there's no statistics or information we get from the casinos. To provide us to do with projections, and we stayed conservative and left it at this year's level, which is still $120,000 favorable.
Ms. Tortel.
Thank you, Chairman. In conjunction with Legislator Brescher was saying, that was also take into account that there's going to be no food service there, and I understand several places are already looking at the empty storefronts in there for food service. So that will bring up even more revenue on that end.
Hopefully.
So is there any of that accounted into any of this, any of the?
No, we try to look at existing and not too much of the future, because what happens if they don't rent or they don't bring somebody in?
I noticed some of this was projection also, so
Yeah.
that's why I'm trying to see what, if that was included or not. Okay, thank you.
I think that would more show up in your sales tax revenues,
Right,
right, and in the payments from the casinos. That's based on the gambling team.
yeah.
Mr. O'Donnell.
And so they're scheduled to open December 15th. Hopefully they will open December 15th. Every store that's over there now with the exception of the Halloween store, which was packed, was empty. So whether the casino's able to fill all those other stores, who knows?
Well,
But
there's
as of a couple of days before Halloween, all those stores were empty. And the Halloween store was packed. That's it.
Rent could be pretty cheap over there if you wanted to take a gamble.
You mean empty as far as
Customers.
customers? Okay, thank you.
All right, the next slide is just about the sanitary landfill. As we know, you know, basically items come in, items go out. And, you know, the spread on the tipping fees is where you cover your expenses. So what we're seeing right now is that for 22, again, based on the budget, you're going to come in about $610,000 above where you anticipated. And using that same tonnage based on the amount of money that you pay to haul the garbage out, you're going to have a $440,000 offsetting expenditure overage on that line, which nets you about, if I did the math in my head correctly, about $170,000. Good. For the 2023 budget, we left the amount of tonnage relatively flat with last year. And based on your current tipping fees, that would generate $13.34 million. And it would also create an unfavorable variance. We concurred with the expenditures because they used the same tonnage for the shipping out. But when they used a lesser tonnage, more tonnage coming in, it doesn't work that way. If 100 tons come in, 100 tons go out. So that's why we have an unfavorable variance of
The
$290,000.
budget is also subsidized with $600,000 in fund balance. The current year, you budgeted $400,000 to subsidize the sanitary landfill budget. So you're going to use about $1 million between 22 and 23, and you'll have about $1 million left over in fund balance in the sanitary landfill. So which means that if you continue on the same track, same tonnage, don't change the rates, same expenses, in 2 years, you're going to have no fund balance left in the sanitary.
Well, I don't think you can reasonably expect the expenditures over the next 2 years to be exactly the same too. I mean, your costs, I'm assuming half would be going.
Again, it's the tonnage that you charge, the cost to haul it away. And again, you're subsidizing the current year, you're going to subsidize it by 400,000. Proposed year, 600,000, 1 million remains after next year in fund balance.
So the spread on your current tipping fees, your hauling fee out need to be looked at. All right, so
So those are basically the larger revenues that we dealt with, other than the reimbursement revenues, the state and federal aid that occurs in DSS and the health department. I don't know if there's any questions about any of the revenues. I think we kind of answered most of them.
We've done them at the time. Anything left over to question? On the front parts, not the second part. Revenues, not expenditures.
Yeah,
We're good.
Go ahead, Mike.
you have a total of all the favorable variances?
We do.
Is it $60 million? Close to it?
Well, you're looking at
This is the new budget.
You're looking at 2022.
One looking, okay, you're right.
Yeah, you're looking at 2022,
And that's
the
what?
budget surplus.
Okay.
and most of that is sales tax.
$60 million?
Yeah, most of it is sales tax. Yeah, sales. And we're gonna, there's a schedule in the back that we're gonna show you where your fund balance was at the beginning of 22, where we think it's gonna end up at the end of 22, and then how it carries over into 23, and then based upon our findings in 23, what we think fund balance will be at the end of 23. So we're gonna show you that schedule in a little bit, once Chris gets you through some of the expenditures.
But I just want to make sure you understand, you asked only about the favorable findings of about $60 million. We also had unfavorable findings too. You
I
have
know,
to net the two.
that's what I was asking, total is on the minus
The total is, if I do it in my head, is roughly 40.
40.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. So again, the first expenditure that we look at is your personnel costs, and one of the largest parts of the budget. And you can see that in 2022, you adopted 171.5 million. It looks like you're only going to spend about 159.24 million. So a favorable variance of 12.28 million. And that's exclusive of the overtime, because we talk about that in a different area. If you remember, your 22 budget included a vacancy factor of about 5.23 million. So you basically did about 17.5 million better than you anticipated on filling positions. And we know that just by watching the news, everybody's having trouble filling positions. Everybody's trying to give incentives to try to get people to take jobs. So I don't think government is any different. They're struggling to get qualified people.
So this, for 2023, this appropriation supports 2,475 positions, of which a variance saving of $5.3 million has been budgeted. And if you turn to page 15 of the spiral book, you can see at the time we did our analysis, where the vacancies occurred in which departments, how much they were budgeted in the 2023 budget in salaries, how much was the vacancy factor, and what was the variance. And if you look at that chart, you'll see there's a subtotal, and beneath the subtotal, you have public health and DSS, where those costs are usually also reimbursed on the revenue side. But above that, it's usually property tax levy and, local taxation. So you can see that there are at the time, 281 positions that were vacant, but were also budgeted in the 2023 budget at a cost of $14.8 million. And there's a vacancy factor of 3.8, leaving a remaining amount of money of $11 million. Okay, if all those positions are not filled.
Question, Mike?
I just want to be clear on this vacancy factor. Those are the positions that are funded in the budget, or that are funded but not filled.
The vacancy,
Existing.
okay, so the vacancy factor is applied to basically all positions in the budget, but they're identified for the purposes of this chart with the vacant positions. So what it's saying is that there were 281 positions other than public health and DSS that were vacant at the time we did our analysis. The proposed budget includes a full salary for those 281 positions. However, the administration acknowledges that not all positions will be filled January 1. So they put in what's called a vacancy factor, which serves to subtract from for each of those positions. You follow me?
Just about.
We reduce the amount
Well,
of
let's say for,
revenue you need to cover those
yeah,
positions.
so let's say,
So there's 11 million more than you need in that budget.
no. There's 11 million,
You can fill every single budgeted.
and then you would use 11 million. If you did all of those
Right.
positions, if you filled all the positions,
But you're comparing it to what departments, I understand what you're saying, but for me, it's like the vacant positions that are allowed to be filled are funded with that $14 million,
correct,
right?
they're budgeted.
So the vacancy factor is in case they need to fill more.
No,
No.
vacancy factor,
Nick, the vacancy factor is the amount of money that you're gonna save in the time that it's gonna take you to fill the positions.
Correct.
It's a savings off of that 14 million, because they don't get filled every week.
They don't-
Or
They don't
get
all
filled at the
get,
start.
they don't all get filled on January
January
1st.
1st.
Right.
Right.
But that's where the variance comes in of 11 million, right? Because you haven't filled them, the money sits there in the budget, gets taxed, and at the end of the year, you only filled 20 of them, or however many was in the budget, right?
Well, the plan that the administration is proposing
It's
is to fill the job.
Right, so
Yeah,
on January 1st,
Every year.
all 280 positions were filled, we would spend 14.8 million,
Right.
right? So for every job that's not filled on January 1st, then savings, cha-ching, 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 right? So what's in the budget is only 3.789 of that 14 million, right?
That's the
Right.
amount of savings you
That's the
get.
estate.
Right.
Right, so you basically budgeted 11 million to fill those 14 million dollars of positions, assuming they'll start maybe staggered.
Right, you don't have an average of, how many of those funded but vacant positions get filled every year? Because that's where we get most of our money back every year, correct? So there's an opportunity here, is what I'm gonna be talking about, is in regards to the funded but unfilled positions to defund them. That lowered the tax rate, or not the tax, well, maybe the tax rate too, right?
Tax levy.
Tax levy, by doing the right thing. I mean, we can still fill any position we need to fill. If we unfund them, we can always fund them, right? We'd be saving that money. That's the only point I'm trying to understand here. Because every single year, it's the biggest number in our return to the budget is vacant but unfilled positions. And that's where I'm focused. Thank you. I think I got a little bit of it.
Yeah, well, you have to keep in mind, the revenue side of the budget, you can't manage. You're just a recipient of it.
Right.
What you can manage is the expense side of the budget.
Right.
So in economic downturns or when revenues don't come in as anticipated, a good administrator, county executive, his department heads will lay back and not fill positions so as to help offset the revenue loss.
There's no.
So it gives you the budget flexibility. Well,
No, I understand that.
it gives you the budget
I
flexibility.
got that. I wanted to go from 100% to 10%. That's what I'm looking to do. I mean, it's not gonna happen, but that's what I try to stay focused on. We can do a better job. So I'll talk about it when we get, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr.
Anyway,
Patel. I'm sorry, one second, one more.
Thank you. Page 15 of the spiral book.
Right.
That we're looking at the chart on. The second one down, public works. So you have 24 vacant positions, $838,798. I'm assuming a lot of those positions would be like seasonal positions that we budget for the summertime. But in the budget itself, are you referring to all of DPW under that category, meaning DPW administration, building, county roads, road machinery?
Yes,
So it's that entire,
it's the entire.
Right, public
grouping.
works, yeah.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that it was.
And those are full-time funded positions.
So these are all full-time funded positions, not including the part-time positions
Correct. Full-time positions
in the entire,
in the public works umbrella.
okay. But now going back, the entire chart, you're talking about solely that you, in this chart, accounted for only full-time funded positions.
Correct.
And not any of the part-time funded positions that these departments may or may not have,
Correct.
which
The vacancies, these are,
jump this number even a whole lot higher.
right, these are vacant positions, vacant full-time positions that are proposed in the 2023 budget. And we've applied the vacancy factor that management has put in the budget against those vacant positions, because that's how they're likely to achieve the vacancy factor that they budgeted in each department and in the aggregate countywide of 3.8 for those non-reimbursable positions. Then you have DSS and public health, which are another 84 positions, but those positions, the cost for those positions are subject to revenue reimbursement in federal and state aid. So that's why we put the subtotal.
And then you have other 149 vacant positions. Budgeted salary for 2023, $7,385,420, with a vacancy factor, 758,642, for a variance of $6,626,778. Again, that's full-time positions,
Countywide, other than listed. in
other than
those
what's
departments.
broken out in
Right,
here.
right,
And again,
correct.
where do the funds for the part-time positions that we have throughout the various departments of the county come in on any of this?
Oh, they listed it, but
Yeah, they're all, I mean, all,
Right, I understand that.
But
I'm
they
talking
don't-
about
the salary savings again is an umbrella to cover any kind of savings in the budget. They just put it against, in usually in the personnel category for full-time positions. But again, flexibility is that they don't need part-time people, that's vacancies.
Then we don't use them.
But we're
Right,
just,
but
we're
then
just
we're-
putting it
but
against
we're
those
still
things that you really
funding them.
control.
We're still funding those
Yes.
Yeah.
part-time positions though.
Mhm.
Do we have a number on that by any chance? Yeah, they're
Part-time and seasonal?
part-time positions, vacancy, like how much we're funding in
They
vacancy.
don't have a summary in the budget. book.
I don't know the summary.
If you can get that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
All right, the next slide is just a repeat of the chart Nick was just speaking about. And then the next slide, we talk about overtime. And I think Nick already touched on this, you budgeted about 7.1 million, but it looks like you might spend 11.36. The majority of that, 2.6 of that, 4.26 shortfall is related to the correctional facility in the jail. And you did have 33 vacant positions, and again, with the mandated post, you covered it with overtime, so yeah, ended up going over budget by about 2.6 million in jail. And the only other large area that had an overage was the emergency services, and they were about 540,000 over on overtime compared to the budget.
And there's a chart on page 17 of the spiral book that shows.
There's also 15 on 36 here.
Yeah,
Really,
I showed
48
14.
was-
So 15,
yeah.
And then in next year's budget, they did raise it slightly to 7.71. Again, factoring in, we know that you're running a test for the correctional officers. We know you're doing your best to try to fill the positions. But again, Prudence says we think you're still going to come up $1 million short on the overtime for jail. So we're recommending we're showing an unfavorable variance on the jail stuff of another $1 million. For the 22 budget. Even if you hire the individuals, you still have to train the correctional officers, you still have to monitor in the shadow for a while. So you still may burn some overtime. The next slide was just your labor contracts. It indicates that majority of your labor contracts expire at the end of 22, but your largest union is through 23, which is CSEA.
So of the 2,475 positions, Chris, 2,245 are covered by collective bargaining and 230 positions are not.
Their salaries are set. The next slide, again, is just a comparison unit in neighboring counties. You can see that here, you're right at the average. The personnel as it relates to your overall budget is about 22%. And you can see the average for all the counties is 22%, so you're right there. Next slide, I believe, is total positions. Again, Orange County has more positions than the other counties, it's larger. We also have the nursing home, which accounts for about 340 of those positions. Next slide is Board of Elections. Not much to talk about here. Basically, we agree, we look at the per diems, those are the people working the polls. The county did increase the per diem about 9%. And you are going to add a new early voting site in 23. So you raised the recommended budget to 1.21 million. We think it should be about 910, so we got a $300,000 favorable variance there. And the next slide starts to talk about the early intervention and those health programs for the children that you run. And you can see that you're very close to the budget on this, 6.37 versus 6.68, about a $310,000 unfavorable variance. But you will get reimbursed on the state aid side by about an additional $148,000. So even though you are coming in slightly over budget on this, you did service about 130 more children this year than last year. So that's the reason for the overage. And you see the recommended budget did increase to 7.62 million. We think it more 7.28 based on the number count. They're projecting roughly about 200 children, similar to what you saw in 2019. So we have a 340,000 favorable variance in 23. And again, basically funded by the state 50%. So 170,000 unfavorable variance on state aid.
So the net is favorable 170,000 when you take the expense minus the reimbursement that you're losing. And you're going to find that on a lot of these programs that there's identified variances, and most of it on the health department kind of breaks even.
Yeah, between health and DSS this year, there's not much variance on the 23 side, except in one account, which we'll spend a little time on.
But we did the write-up, the narrative write-up to be helpful for you. This way you can see what's happening within the departments themselves with the caseloads and some of the issues that do exist.
Transportation, you can see that in 22, still not many parents are utilizing the transportation that you offer. So you did have a $414,000 favorable variance, but again, offset by state aid, 203,000, left you about 200,000 to the good there. It did bump the budget up to 609,000. That's because when you did your RFP for your bus contracts, it did come in about 32% higher based on fuel costs and other costs. So we'll concur with that. And again, you may have savings if the parents still are uncomfortable putting their children on a bus, because you also offer them, let them ride the children, drive the children to school, reimburse them for mileage. So you are offering alternative methods for the parents to have the children receive your services.
And if you want to refer to that bus contract, it's on page 22 of the spiral booklet in that, in the middle of the last paragraph. As well as at the top of page 22.
All right, the next two slides will talk about the education of the handicapped children. So on the first one, you had a budget of 3.59, you are projecting 3.70. There was a rate increase that was given that increased the cost of the services from $100 to $120. That's why you're coming in about $110,000 unfavorable variance, again offset by state aid of 66,000. And then when we go to the 2023 budget, we were talking with the departments, and again, it's a common theme. They're seeing the levels of service going back to the 2019 level, that's what they're planning on, which is the pre-pandemic levels. And utilizing that, we see the budget needs to be about 4.36 million. So a $760,000 unfavorable variance, but again, offset by $450,000 state aid.
So that's out to 310.
The next slide is your bigger program. This is again, the education of the children. You see your budget is 25.06. Based on the current usage, it's about 21.5 million. So $3.5 million favorable variance, but again, offset by a loss of state aid of about 2.1 million for a net of positive 1.4. Most of this is caused by a shortage of providers. You do have children that are waiting to be in the program, but you don't have the providers and to service all the children. So again, when we do the 23 budget, the department is assuming that they will have the providers on board. So they budgeted $26 million, 26.25. We see it at about 25.62. So it's still 630,000 favorable, offset by the state aid. So if you get the providers, you're going to need the funding in the budget to pay for it. And the state is hoping they're doing everything they can to entice people to come back in and provide those services. I guess during COVID, they found other means of working, but I think the state's also increasing the rates to try to entice people back in. The next slide is the transportation of the children in the program. You can see that this year, it looks like you're going to have a $2.36 million favorable variance. Again, parents were letting the children on the buses as often as they didn't pass. Budget, again, we try to stay conservative, assuming that you're going to go back to the levels of service that you had in prior years. So we have 11.83 for 23, which is a $610,000 favorable variance. And that does factor in that 32% increase for the providers that goes from January through June, and then from July on for the rest of 23, it's another 4% increase. So we factored that in, and again, based on the utilization in 2019, we came up with 11.83 million.
We've gone through a few pages here. Any questions?
Pretty much the favorable and unfavorable in that area kind of breaks it up.
The next slide is your jail medical services. As we already talked about, your census in the jail is coming down.
All right.
So what we have is your contract for medical services provides for the 600 prisoners. And when they don't have to provide the coverage or the services, you get a credit back. So this year you got $560,000 roughly in credits back from the vendor. Next year, based on the projection that we have in the census, you should have another $440,000 favorable variance. But know that if your census rises or more prisoners come in, you won't receive that credit. But based on current census levels, right now in prison population, you should still receive some of the credits. You also do budget in that jail contract, for some catastrophic care. Luckily, you didn't have to use any of it during 2020.
So if people aren't caught and released, then that could have some changes also.
Yes.
Mr. Tui, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Chairman, thanks. I just had a question regarding, I think you said that there was a 13% increase for the bus companies?
32.
32, okay, 32. And that's for the first year, and 4% increases for the 2 years after. Is that 4% per year or 4%?
It's an annual 4%.
Annual
So we did.
4% in 2 years.
Yeah, every 2 years.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Next area we get to is employee benefits. And as we talk about this, remember this is tied to your vacancy savings. So as you don't fill positions and you have carryover, you will have savings in these accounts. So your health insurance, these are your retirement costs first. You budgeted 23.2, and it looks like you're only going to come in about 21.98 for 1.22 million favorable variance. A lot of that is due to the vacancies that you saved. And also when the state came out with the rates, they do modify them and they did come down very slightly from what they were originally projected. Using the projected rates that are in right now on the state website, we come up with 23.71 for next year, again, assuming that you're going to fill your positions. So it's $160,000 unfavorable variance, again, based on the rates.
Those rates are on page 27. The spiral book.
And one thing you might want to keep in mind is that as we move forward to next year, the state fiscal year end for the pension system is March 31st. And March 31st, the stock market is considerably down.
Right.
And that's how they factor in the rate. So you may see a rate increase for 24 because they take a 3-year average return on the market. And when March was down, that'll factor into their calculation. The next slide is the health insurance. Again, large number. You budgeted 69.36 million. You came in at about 64.31 million, a $5 million favorable variance. Again, a lot of that has to do with the number of positions that went unfilled during the year. It also factors in that some of the employees contribute to it. And then last year, when you do the budget and you put your budget together, NYSHIP has not come out with its final rates. They just give you an estimate of what they think will come in. And the rates came in about 1% less than they had anticipated when they provided the information to you. And that's 1% aggregate. So, depending on the plan, it could have been more or less, married, single, things like that. So part of the 5 million is the fact that NYSHIP rates came in less than they had originally projected, and you had some unfilled positions. Again, when we look at the budget, we have 77.96 in the budget. We're looking at 76.64, basically $1.32 million favorable variance. And we came to that by looking at your insurance bills, and we look at the breakout between married, single, and a variety of plans. Assuming that ratio stays roughly the same, the county takes the worst case scenario and budgets the higher amount in health insurance per employee. And for those vacancies, we know some of the people might have a single plan, might have a different plan. So we looked at the spread that you currently have and applied the same percentage.
In the aggregate, that was about a 9% increase
Yes.
between the adopted budget and the recommended budget, which is also net of the vacancy factor.
Yes, they also do, before we move on, they do budgets and vacancy savings in the fringe benefits category too, because they know they're not going to fill all the positions, just like they know on the other side. So they do put in a factor there too.
Deb, what is our cost for families
Around 36.
and singles?
It's 18.
So it's 18.
I'm not looking here.
36 and 18.
Did I saw those numbers printed somewhere, but I don't remember where I saw them. Anyone have any idea?
Yeah.
That's where it was.
Oh, that's where I probably saw it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John.
No, we just put in the rate increase. All right, the next area is Social Security. Not much to say here. Looks like you're favorable, 830,000. Again, based on vacant positions and the fact that people do go over the maximum amount for Social Security. All right, the next page is just the schedule of your debt service and where you spend the money for your bonds and principal and interest. We concur with this for both years. There's nothing really to say, but we put it in here just so you can see that your overall debt service between 22 and 23 did go down by 3.5 million.
And this doesn't reflect any new borrowing?
Right.
Any new borrowing would probably hit the 24 budget, not the 23 budget.
You take out your debt, we'll push the payments forward. The next slide is everybody's favorite subject, community college tuition chargebacks. I think for once we're coming in, I think the second year in a row, you're coming in under budget. So you're coming in about $860,000 favorable for 22. And again, you took that into account slightly when you did your 23 budget, and you dropped it to 6.9. We still think you have $260,000 favorable. And the reason for this, unfortunately, is the same reason when we present the college, community college budget to you, is less students. It's basically just based on enrollment. So every other community college, just like you, is seeing a decline in enrollment. Therefore, you're seeing a decline in the amount of money that you have to spend here. And on the next slide, we do break it out into the major schools, like you always ask. And you can see that RCC is still one of your top receivers, with Fashion Institute right behind it on sales. And you can see your top 5 account for almost 80%. of what money paid out.
Do you have a slide that shows the money that we received from other?
No, because that goes to the community
That goes
college.
in the college budget.
Okay,
That's a revenue to them.
right.
Unfortunately, you don't get to see that in this budget. The next slide is just informational. It's about your contingency.
Contingency, increase $3 million.
Right. And the only money you used this year was for the City of Newburgh Water Supply Land Acquisition Project. So you did use $620,000, roughly $600,000 was for that one project.
What can you
Next,
say about
Mike,
the Department of Social Services?
Mike, eh?
Yeah, back on contingency, please.
Mhm.
Thank you, Lee. So this year's budget has 5 million of contingency,
The proposed,
proposed budget. And how does that compare with last year's?
$2 million.
Okay. And we didn't use all of last year's.
no,
You used 620 of it so far.
Okay. If I told you that this was the 9th year of this current executive putting budgets together, and I told you in the past 8 years, whenever we had the contingency, we never used the full amount, would that surprise you?
No, because I was once a budget director and I put contingency funds in the budget as well, because what it represents is things that you can't anticipate when you're putting your budget together. There's always something that
I
you
understand.
can't
I
anticipate.
understand, but whatever we've had, we've never had any emergency above and beyond whatever that contingency was in the past.
Mhm.
If this past year was 2 million, can you tell me what the other 7 years were? Do you know off the top of your head?
I honestly don't. but
Okay. If I
probably ranged
go ahead.
between $1 and $3 million. I feel.
Because I was gonna say, if I told you it was the maximum ever during that time was 3 million, would that surprise you?
No, that's because I just said it's probably
1 to 3.
ranged between 1 to 3.
And 3 million would not be the correct number. If I told you that the maximum ever before last year was $1 million,
Mhm.
and that is the actual number, and we've never surpassed that. So just wanted to get that on the record.
Thank you. Mr. Hines?
Yeah, just so you know, at public safety, it came out that the jail, as our accountants were pointing out, is going to be short at least $1 million. I think this is the payroll piece, right?
Correct.
I think there's also pieces in the jail budget that, for instance, food services, the sheriff believes that will be short 507,000, I believe, is what he told us. We don't have the prisoners to work in the kitchen anymore, so we have to, when we put out the new contract, they have to actually bring employees with them to help with that. And the main reason I think the contingency is so high is because the jail budget is shot. And it was recommended to the Public Safety Committee that we not fix it and that we fall back to contingency.
That's gonna be my question. Why?
So don't
why not
spend it if
fix-
that's what's in your head.
No. Why, if you've got shortfalls in budgets, should you not, to the accountants, should you not be working on correcting the budget line items as opposed to just making one big number that everyone can dip into when we're not accurate on our budget projection at the end of the year or during the year?
Well, first off,
I mean, if we're short
Usually-
this money, why
usually-
not fix that line item?
Usually,
recommended
usually
not.
the contingency, when there's a shortfall identified in the budget, typically the budget director will come with a budget amendment, a budget transfer to the legislature, saying that what we anticipated, for instance, for food cost or medical cost in the jail was X dollars, and now we see we're gonna run over, so we're proposing a transfer from contingency into the jail.
I guess I'm asking, if we already know that there's a problem with those line items, why aren't we fixing them during the budget process?
I think we're waiting to have the new sheriff see what he needs.
That was the recommendation from both the county executive side on the budget.
Yeah, that's what I believe. It's been a little bit, well, let's say kicking the can down the road or lack of oversight, I believe, for the last 6 or 9 months. So things are manifesting themselves at budget time, and let's wait for the new sheriff to come
Okay,
in
and
and
that
get a
explains-
handle on it.
That explanation I'll accept. That makes more sense than not fixing the line items. But then what we're saying is this is a huge contingency amount. I mean, in the past, we had 1 million and half millions. That's
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And so this huge amount is there because we're anticipating already that there are line items that are going to be short. And we're going to be dipping into this contingency for them.
Correct.
Okay.
When we find,
Okay.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Right, so I agree that some of that 5 million contingency should be allocated into the specific department budgets. So big. The other problem is like in the last 5 years, we've got from, I think, the book said 753 prisoners down to now 350. So as Nick stated, maybe it is time for us to actually hire consultant to give us an overview, and that'll help whoever the new sheriff is get a handle on exactly what's going on there. This is the first time hearing that part of the problem is that they used to have prisoners cooking the food, now they don't have them. So they have to hire.
They have to be sentenced prisoners. They can't be temporary holds. So that's the big problem. Since
You know what I'm
it's not a
saying?
problem, I guess it's a good thing if people want to.
Well, you're also getting a lot of people who aren't being sentenced now because they're being let go.
Could be offset by.
And they're, get out of jail free cards.
We're having to buy, right? So there's a lot of moving targets over there, right? So
Yeah.
maybe we should have a discussion on hiring.
I think that is a good discussion with the new sheriff.
And everything.
But when,
And that's Kevin's committee's responsibility, not this committee.
when can that take place? I mean, if we're concerned about it, and we want to address it, what are we waiting for? This is the last time we can make changes, right?
No, you can make changes on the floor.
I know the chairwoman hoped that they would be all.
No, but what the contingency does is it provides for the new administration to come into the sheriff's office and take a careful look at all of this and then there's money there to make any adjustments that together with us, they feel necessary to do. And one of them, as Legislator O'Donnell pointed out, was the recommendation that's in your spiral book as far as hiring an outside consultant, as far as deployment of employees. And I remember you mentioned, we saw that when we met with the leadership as well. We talked about that. So those types of monies, that's something new. We didn't do that before. So that is included in the contingency as well.
Let me just point, the contingency budget is for all the departments, not just the sheriff's department.
Correct.
Contingencies.
Correct.
So what Mr. Nagin-Fox is saying, with not using $2 million of a contingency every year, that would take care of just about the sheriff's department. So why is there $3 million on top of it? What's the other plan? Because there's got to be another plan behind $5 million. If they know we don't use half of our contingency, why is there so much in it? And I know it's not all that, and we haven't heard from any other departments that there's issues that are going to be emergencies that we need monies for. In fact, a lot of them have too much money. So what's the recommendation? Why is that okay? I mean, I just don't understand why we add 3 million to it when we could address it with the existing contingency amount just about. I could see maybe adding $1 million to it, and hope that it doesn't get that far, because it probably won't. But adding 2 million, I don't see the reasons. What's the reason?
Contingency can be anything. Contingency can be
Yeah.
lawsuit.
You just heard what's happened over the years I've been here. I don't think we've ever used all the contingency, and it's never been more than $2 million.
And part of that is being lucky.
Oh, so you're gonna be
Mr. O'Donnell.
unlucky now.
So that is the recommended budget from the county executive. It has nothing to do with Nick and Chris.
No, I'm not saying it does.
The numbers. right?
It has to do with us.
Right.
We gotta say
That's
something.
us, exactly. So you can make a motion to lower it.
Later, after the presentation.
Right.
Right.
Mr. Brush,
Yeah, I mean, you know, you want to be protected in that. I mean, you heard, some of us heard from IT last week, if we ever had a breach of security with our IT, what it would cost us. And believe me, it would be a lot, just like Suffolk County had. They're still not back up and running after months. You know, in the Village of Montgomery, we had a boiler problem. We had to get a new boiler, and that's where you dip into contingency. You never know when you're gonna have a dramatic circumstance, you know, like a special event.
The dam could break.
You know, it might not happen, and it hasn't happened over the last few years, but it always could happen. And that's why you want to protect yourself. So,
I get it, Steve. I'm just saying it's too much, way too much. You're taxing people too much for something we don't use. That's my.
Mr. O'Donnell.
If we had some type of disaster, like legislative pressure said, we always had surplus to build it. Never put money, this amount
Right.
into it.
Okay.
Just a-
Mike A.
Yeah, just a point. Yeah, the contingency is for emergency purposes, and it could be debated how much is enough and how much is too much. But if it wasn't there and it was an emergency, you also have cash balances on the books that this legislature can always appropriate to whatever the emergency is. The contingency being built into the budget is just another way to get more taxpayer dollars.
That's exactly right.
We're in social services at this point.
So social services, let me give you a quick summary first. If you want more details, we'll go into it. But most of the variance is going to occur in one account. So overall, for 22, you have roughly a $16 million overall savings on the social service programs. And for 23, we're projecting only 751,000 favorable. If you go to the next slide, almost all of the savings appears on this line. You can see that this is MMIS, the Medicaid line. And if you were projecting 13 million of that 16 million savings right here on one line. And what it is, it's all related to, and I know we say it every year, it's the FMAP program, the Federal Medicaid Assistance Program, where the government gives you a credit on the weekly shares amount that they take to cover your share of the Medicaid program. Currently, that FMAP, again, in round numbers, is roughly $320,000 per week. That program expires March 31st and then has to be renewed. And every year, you never know if it's going to be renewed or not. So your budget always anticipates that it will not be renewed. So therefore, you have the savings of 13 million. It's roughly 300,000 a week times 39 weeks gives you that $13 million. Your budget for 23 is basically the exact same item. It looks at the maximum amount that you can be exposed for Medicaid, backs off the known FMAP program from January through March 31st, and then goes to the maximum amount for the balance of the year. I think the only difference between this year and prior years is concern over the federal government, who's given out ARPA money, gave out CARES money. They may need to find some way to reduce aid to municipalities. FMAP might be one of them. Nobody knows. The state hasn't given any indication, but they haven't given you an approval letter for April 1st through the end of the year. So right now, this budget assumes worst case scenario that you pay the maximum amount that you're required to pay under the law. Because Medicaid is a formula that was established, I think it was back in 2006 or 7, where they put a cap in on it. So this takes you right to the cap. So if FMAP is reinstituted, you may see another $12 million savings in this line. But if it is not reinstituted, you're going to need every dollar that's on it. So that's basically DSS in a nutshell. We can go through some of the programs if you so desire. The next slide is a daycare, which is probably one of the ones that people are most interested in. Again, this accounted for another 1.32 million of budgetary savings on the expense side, mostly offset by federal and state aid of 1.15. And the reason I just mentioned budget here again is usage. you didn't have the providers to take care of the children, and you're looking for providers. And that's where next year the budget comes in, where they changed the threshold for qualify for the program from 200% of the poverty level to 300% of the poverty level, meaning more people qualify. You guys can get back to work, you have a place to put them.
So you have a slide on each of the categories.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yeah, just got a question. On 1.32 favorable.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming there's a different percentage for federal and state aid.
Yes,
Mhm.
the federal
The
reimbursement,
other
yeah.
Departments.
Yeah.
That's why it's so close. It's only $1 for $1.
There's,
Some of the other.
yeah, there's two programs in daycare. One is your Title 19 and Title 20. The federal program is basically 100% funded, and the state program is roughly 25% funded. So that's why it's different.
Okay,
And
thank
most of
you.
your vacancies and most of your unused were in the federal program.
Thanks, Jim.
So again, all the other slides, I mean, you do have variances up and down. As I said, they don't amount to very much.
Yep.
But your budget, what it does is conservatively, it tries to get back to 2019 levels of eligible people receiving services. And we tried to factor in, the current economic cost of living increases. And again, we came very close, on a $200 million budget to their number. We only had a variance of about $710,000.
Okay, you can go on.
We're gonna jump to page 52.
And there are slides in here comparing you to the other counties, just so if you have any interest.
This is transfer to capital fund, total budget. Recommends contribution of 6.85 million. We've got capital fund. I believe that during the current year, the budget was amended to make a contribution of 13.88 to the capital.
Mike A.
Yeah, thank you. When you guys first walked in here, you and I were the only one in here, and I started asking questions. So let me hold off until we get here. I was a little confused because I've never seen it actually budgeted before. I get last year, this year's budget. We didn't have anything budgeted, but we appropriated 13.88 million into the fund during the year. But this year, we're actually budgeting a transfer of that amount. I don't remember ever seeing that before. You didn't think you ever remembered it either.
I don't remember it. I do remember that the county at times set aside monies for capital projects in their fund balance.
We reserve it in the fund balance that it will be used, but here we're actually budgeting. Here's my question. So is this not another way where we're increasing the taxation on the people by putting it in here as opposed to later during the year getting it from the reserve balances that we always do?
Yeah, I do know on page, under the pages, there was a list of capital projects, Chris.
45?
Page 40. You're right.
Yeah, so there's a listing of capital projects that were under consideration. Whether or not this money is to help offset some of that.
Yeah, but that's not my question. So, and it's nothing that you can answer because you're not the one who put the budget together and don't know the motives behind it. But this is just another way to increase the taxation that we're getting from the people, as opposed to, I get it, if we're going to use it for some of that stuff like we always do during the year, we would appropriate the money, just like we did this year, the 13.8 million, from the reserves that we have, maybe some of which we've designated for the particular project. So I'm just pointing that out. Thank you.
I don't know, did the 13.8 million come from, that came from fund balance?
So that wasn't
reducing.
Mr. O'Donnell.
So that wasn't any tax on our citizens.
Well, how did it get fund balance? From sales tax, or general revenues from,
Right, but it
it
wasn't.
could be sales tax, it could be federal aid.
It wasn't in last year's budget, so it wasn't part of the county
It
taxation.
wasn't part of the levy.
Right.
It wasn't part of it.
And now this 6.8 will be part of the levy.
Or part of county share. It could be property taxes, it could be sales taxes, it could be hotel tax, it could be
Tax.
tax.
Part of the
Same
budget.
as
It's
this
the
point-
three-letter word.
Same as this point with
Right.
the contingency. Right, will be
tax.
But it does reduce your need for bonding to cover these projects, so there is a future savings on interest and principal.
Right, but again, I just want to be clear. Of course, every penny we have came somehow through tax, but what I'm saying is this 6.85 million will be raised through taxes in the budget next year versus the other way, it was dipping into cash balances that we had that had been raised somehow in the
Prior
past to
years.
get us that tax,
Right.
that money to be sitting there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a correct statement.
Ms. Hotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the questions that I would have on this particular part is any of these proposed projects that you've listed on page 45, have we, I believe some of it was talked about being ARPA funding. So we're taking the $75 million that we got from the federal government to use towards some of these projects, if not all of them, and we're collecting the interest on those. So we're kind of double dipping on these projects then. We're putting it under ARPA funding, but then we're putting it in here in the budget. And then, you know, when you talk about our debt service you have down is $34,964,339 on page 39.
Correct.
And you said, how much surplus are we anticipating for this coming 2022?
Somewhere between 45 and 50 million net.
So the surplus that we've taken, that we took from taxation or extra sales tax, whichever way it came in, could wipe out our debt services and reduce the interest that we paid in $7,207,155.
There's a schedule in this presentation that takes you to a fund balance for 2022 and 2023, which at some point is going to be a policy decision or a policy discussion between the executive branch and the legislative branch. As to,
Well, I really think it should be. I mean, we're taxing people who are struggling right now. We're not only just taxing them extra for the vacant positions and these holdover positions, but now we're, you know, they're paying $7 million in interest on bonds that we could potentially wipe out with just 1 year of surplus, 1 year of our surplus. Now, I'm not even talking about the overall picture of the surplus, which is roughly, what was that, Deb? You gave us that number last week? Or one of the two, the overall surplus in the county. 130, huh? $117 million. So I understand the whole, you know, tax cap, the 2% on your budgeting, blah, 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 and not, you know, wanting to reduce your budget by that much. But if we can reduce our overall spending, wipe out $34 million in debt with the $117 million worth of taxpayer monies we have sitting in our bank account earning interest, why the hell are we not doing it?
well,
I mean-
that's a
It's
policy.
only a 1 year.
Yeah.
That 34 million is your 1 year debt service.
That's
We're-
all that.
Yeah, I'm saying we have a principal debt in serial bonds of $27,572,184. Is that's the total principal?
For 1 year.
For 1 year, not the county.
Let's do next.
Only 1 year.
So I'd like to see what our total county is. I'm assuming that.
I'm
it's-
sure. What's our total indebtedness? Again, this goes back to my saying from 20 years ago. We should not tell people what our total indebtedness is, because then they can go, oh, well, you're able to indebt up to 1.8 billion or something
Well,
like that.
that's the ball.
And then they would start,
That's the
then they
borrowing
would
limit.
start, yeah, that's a
That's
bonding,
limit.
and then we would start the program and the chain to go in that direction. You don't want to go that direction.
If we were to do that, what would that do to the tax cap?
Jesus
How would
Christ.
that affect the tax cap, staying under the tax cap, if we were to just willy-nilly pay off, you know, 1 year, $34 million? I think there's some ramifications there.
Well, at some point, if you have to raise the property taxes, you'd have to break the tax cap because you're lower.
Mr. Hines,
I think we have some we're making more money on our money than we're paying in interest right now.
Well, I was gonna suggest that.
Are we, Gary, we're making more money than we're paying?
What the rates that you probably have borrowed at,
Yeah, It's in our free.
are probably equivalent to what you're probably gonna get in interest. Right now, if you invest your money, without depleting, your fund balance to pay it off. But again, when we get to the back to schedules, I think it's gonna invite some discussion on your part, but it's also gonna invite discussion between the administration and the legislature.
I don't think we should ever.
You've had a couple of very good years. The county's finances are in excellent shape. But I can remember when there were some challenging years, not too long ago, when we were coming out of the 2008 recession and the 2012 recession.
Just to follow up on this capital fund page, I think I recall Mr. Deniga telling us that we're gonna do a lot of bridge construction without bonding. Is that what this money is set aside for, the 6.8?
So some of it is for parks, projects, at the Free Hill and Thomas Bowl, and some additional refurbishments over there. The asbestos study, I know it's one of it, and to be honest, it could be part of that, yes.
I thought
don't
that
know
was the
that it's
plan,
all
to
been
pay
done.
cash for some of these big capital projects while it still exists, as opposed to bonding, especially now that interest rates are going up.
Mike A.
No, I didn't.
Oh, I thought you.
No.
So now we come to page 53, which is Valley View. So the significant numbers in Valley View is the fourth line down where it says appropriated surplus. And you'll see for the 2022 budget, you appropriated 6.294 the balance Valley View. And based upon the estimates that are being provided to us, you're likely going to use those funds. And for 2023, you're utilizing $13.8 million of net assets in Valley View for a combined amount of, just about 20 million. And if you turn the page, to page 54, you can see what Valley View's position is on a governmental basis. Keep in mind that Valley View follows a different accounting method than your general fund and your other operating funds. It's on a full accrual. So what we've done is we've taken the deficit from Valley View and subtracted and added back the biggest item, which is post-employment benefits. Post-employment benefits are recorded on an accrual basis in Valley View. You don't record those on a fund level in your governmental funds. But in doing so, it brings us to a number of about $51 million. And if you subtract the 20 million that you're using for 2022 and 2023, it would probably leave you somewhere around $30 million left in Valley View, and that would be its cash. Now, the utilization rate in Valley View, I think it dropped to what, 62,
Yeah,
65%?
62, 63%.
That's why things are down.
So you have some challenges in Valley View. I mean,
Funding
related-
staff,
Yeah.
yeah, related to the census.
Well, we get more people though, when we just did some changes to help get more people to work. Once you get more people to work, you get more people.
Right.
So we just like to bring
Plus
that,
COVID.
we'd like to bring that up to your attention, what the budget has for Valley View. And then, of course, you have the capital projects, which refer to page 45 in the budget book. And you have $51 million worth of new projects. And you have debt service planned of almost $84 million of issuance of debt. And you do know the municipal market now, the cost issue that is increased. I'm sure the Commissioner of Finance has apprised you of that. So timing is going to be of the essence, I guess, and your need to do these projects. One of the things you can do, just remember one thing. You can pass a bond ordinance. You can borrow the money from your fund balance. And then in the future, when you issue bonds, you can repay the fund balance. But you have to pass the bond ordinance and first, before you do that borrowing. And sometimes that's a good strategy. The interest rates are increasing.
We're gonna go back one step. You have an answer?
271 million.
271 million is our
Thank you.
debt, county debt. Thank you.
Yeah, so if we flip to page 60, what we're gonna do on page 60 is, this is a summary of the findings that we had for 2022 and how it impacts your fund balance. So Chris, why don't you start off with the opening balance as of December 31st, 2021?
Is it better to look at these pages or these pages?
I think it's better to look at page 60, starting on page 60.
In the book, it's the slide that we have the same slide in both.
Yeah, we have.
In the book, it's on page 69 and 70, which matches that slide.
Yeah.
So what we started with was your fund balance as of the audit, which was December 31st, 2021. The overall fund balance in this general fund only was 144.65 million. Part of that money was in, Nick likes to call them those buckets as we go through. So you have some non-spendable, you have some restricted, you have committed, you have encumbrances, and then you have the $9 million that you appropriated for use in the 23, but on the 22 budget. So it left you unassigned fund balance of 117.6 million. That's the money that's available to you to address emergencies, to balance future budgets. Now, to that, we go to our findings. And we spoke about, your sales tax. We spoke about how much extra you distributed to the municipalities. So you overall had a $41.8 million projected revenue surplus. Again, projected based on a point in time. On the next slide, we spoke about all the expenditures. And on the expenditure side, you had a $33.3 million favorable variance. Again, when you look at these numbers, very large numbers, but you have to keep in mind, when you put the budget together last year, we were coming in and going out of the pandemic. So you were planning for, hoping for the best case and planning for worst case. So these variances we're seeing in a lot of budgets, schools, towns, everywhere. So keep that in mind. So overall, you came out projected budget surplus of about $75 million. You add that to the 117 million, it gives you 192 million free and clear for use in future years. Add back in the same restricted, committed, because we don't know where they're going to be at the end of 22. We'll leave you with a net $209.8 million fund balance.
Mike A.
Yeah, very quickly. The 209.8 million corresponds very closely, I think, to what we were told last week. Of course, that does not include the 75 or so million ARPA money.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So that's where you'll possibly end the year if all these projections get dead on.
And if we turn the
Now
page,
you turn to the next page and we did the exact same.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Well, if you get the 13 FMAP money, right? Does that make that?
That's gonna be
209?
23.
22?
That's 23.
we're going to the next year. Now we're going to the next year.
So now we go to the next year, we start with the number we ended with, the projected 209.84 million. Again, since we don't know what the restricted, non-spendable in those areas are, we left them the same for comparative purposes. Brings you back to the 192. Again, based on our minimum projection for sales tax, it looks like you'd be 7 million short in revenues. But on the expense side on the next slide, you had the budget flexibility of about 4.25 million. So net 2.87 million possible unfavorable variance, reduces the 192 down to 189.9 million. And again, you end the year roughly 207 million. And yet that does not include the FMAP because we didn't put that in as a final.
So if the FMAP comes in and you don't complete it, that would give you additional. Page 64 is a chart of fund balance.
So we talk about what we should have in a recommended fund, 70% or something. I think that's the number that we use on an $800 and $900 million budget, $63 million. Does that include the non-spendable, restricted, committed, and encumbrances as well?
I like to think of it as the unrestricted.
The unrestricted.
7% would be the unrestricted, meaning it hasn't been encumbered and it hasn't been dedicated for any purpose. Now you have, in your fund balance, you have dedicated funds for purposes on your balance sheet. And I don't think that 7%, which has always been your unofficial floor for fund balance, not your ceiling, but your floor.
So, and it just blows my mind that we keep talking about what's happening next year and next year. We're probably, what, 5 years ahead already? I mean, if we had an economy go straight down, we'd be fine for at least 3 years. That's how I see it. So when we talk, or I talk about reducing taxation, there's a reason for it. We've got enough of taxpayer money for a lot of reasons. For everything we could ever want to do, we have plenty of it. Matter of fact, 3 times what the recommended amount. So, you know, when I talk a little later, it just blows my mind that we can never really reduce taxation, because to me, it's sickening that we have that much money in the bank that we've taken from taxpayers and don't want to give enough back. That's all, just a comment, sorry.
Mr. O'Donnell.
I just want to see if I can wrap my brain around a little bit, taxing people twice, all right? So you have 206 here, right? If we get to 13, it's basically 220. If we did put 5 in contingency, it would be 225.
No. If you didn't put 5 into contingency, you wouldn't raise those funds in the budget. Then you have another 5 million that's going on an intergovernmental, inter-fund transfer, of which the administration has already identified that they want to take this other $5 million and use it for a specific purpose as well.
Again, we were told 3 million roughly for equipment that isn't included in the budget, $1 million for the tax relief fund, and $1 million for an insurance reserve.
I'm sorry, where was that from?
It's,
Is that in your book here?
I mentioned it to you when I gave you my opening comments. I said that there was $5 million inter-fund transfer that wasn't specifically earmarked, but it's on page.
That's different than contingency?
Yes.
Yeah, they
In
were,
$1 surplus.
In
they were
addition,
putting it back in the surplus. That's what you said, Nick.
Yeah, well, yeah,
we highlighted on page 57, we put an asterisk next to it.
page what, 520?
It's
Page
in the
520
budget book, it's in 520.
Point for a second. So forget the contingency, do with the 5 million surplus. So with that, increase it from 220 to 225?
Yeah, 'cause
Yes, if you dedicate, if you put the money in there and don't spend it. If you put it in and don't spend it.
So that's 225 then. You've already taxed people on that?
It generated it from
Right.
the various local sources.
So is it fair to say that if we reduce that 225, this is what I'm not understanding? So it might be the only person, but I don't think so. So if we go back on that and tax the people again to put it in the budget, is that taxing the people twice? Is that where you were going? With the $5 million, let's just stick to the $5 million surplus. Right?
The $5 million that the budget says that they want to set
We
up
already taxed
category.
the surplus.
No, they haven't been taxed yet. It's
Oh,
in
it's in the
this
budget.
budget.
It's gonna be.
It's in this budget.
It's gonna be taxed.
It's generated from tax revenue.
Tax.
Yeah.
And if we didn't put it in the budget,
And low.
we still have the same number here.
Correct.
So we don't really need it. It's still point. Okay, I got it.
Ms. Tortel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deb, a point of clarification, we were having the discussion on the reserve accounts and so on and so forth, and you had said that the $5 million was coming from surplus going for the reserve.
So at the end of the year, we're talking, and I think the other that there would be a conversation to identify or assign some of that money towards reserves.
But I thought you were referring to the $5 million that we saw in the budget
That
line.
there is money in there for reserves.
But this, all right, so this $5 million that I'm seeing in here, is this $5 million from the reserve, from money we've already taxed, or is it from new taxation?
This will be for the 2023 budget.
From new
Sales-
taxation
sales tax, property tax,
generated
all-
from
generated
taxation?
from all taxes.
That's not the way I understood it when we had the meeting last week.
Yeah,
So what effect on the budget if we took that $5 million surplus out of the budget? What happens?
Talk surplus or contingency?
No, there's different, both of them. They're two different things.
There's 2 $5 million items
Right.
that they point out.
what
is it
page in the
contingency?
budget is it for our reference? We can go to 520?
Is that it?
Yeah, 520 or 521, it says Actually, it says interfund transfer debt service. I think
Yeah.
that,
It was a long one.
yeah, I think it's just
It's
a,
what we
an
said.
accounting. Right.
Okay, so
What effect on the budget?
What would affect if you wanted to take it out? For low,
Lower
I
the
think
tax rate.
for low.
Lower tax rate.
can someone please, I must be the only one in here that doesn't get this. What is that 5 million being used for ultimately when we get it?
So I did identify it when I did my budget presentation to the legislature. It was for 1 million for self-insurance reserve, 3 million for equipment, and 1 million.
What
for tax
equipment?
savings.
Equipment where?
Could be equipment for the veterans cemetery, it could be equipment for Valley View, it could be equipment for anywhere.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we're doing the same thing here as we did with the 6.85 million. Instead of going into our reserves the way we always do, our fund balances to get money to appropriate for equipment, we're taxing the people
But the
for it.
reserve would be for future years.
What reserve?
Or the 3 million that I was putting it in, that would be for future years, it would have to be spent in next year.
Oh, so this money here that you're talking about would not have to be spent in 2023. It could be for any time. Just like all the cash that we have on hand.
Right.
So this is another way to get more money from the taxpayers. Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let you know that the chairwoman had permitted us to speak with the deputy county executive and the budget and commissioner of finance. And we had a discussion about our presentation on these pages on the fund balance. And they asked us for some suggestions. They also brought up some issues or potential expenditures that they think may impact your 24 and 25 budgets, that they were thinking of trying to keep the baseline budget the same. You understand what I mean by the baseline? In other words, there's an anticipation that health insurance is going to go up dramatically, that pension costs are going to go up dramatically. And that would automatically trigger an increase of the 24 or 25 budgets unless some provision was made to segregate some of the fund balance for those anticipated costs. Now, why are they anticipated? As Chris indicated to you, the pension is going to be calculated based upon the market performance as of March 31st, which is the end of the state fiscal year. And we know what happened with the market performance at the end of March 31st. It was horrific. So their anticipated growth or revenues in the pension are going to necessarily force an increase in the actuarial rate. That's going to happen. We anticipate that happening. You know, the health insurance costs grow by 8, 9, 10% a year. So they came up with some ideas as part of this discussion that we had. I believe they may come to you with some ideas, right? Oh, there he is. I didn't know you were behind. Okay. So I think, again, we are identifying your financial situation, and I've indicated that your financial health is very good. Okay, and I'm sure the county executive will tell you the same thing. Your financial health is very good. Now it's a matter of how to take the, you were the beneficiary of $50 million more in sales tax in 22. So it's a matter of how to best set aside those funds for what you know will eventually happen in probably 3 years.
The other thing is, I mean, if suddenly somebody paid attention to the county, what's the county OPEB level?
Like $1 billion.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Valley View for 300 employees,
Right.
it's 256 million. I mean, nobody ever mentions the county OPEB, balance. Mr. Mike Yang.
Thank you. So I'm confused. We were talking about that 5 million for equipment, and then you went into the insurance costs might go up. So are you saying that you recommended that they do that with the 5 million?
Oh, no.
No.
No, no,
Oh,
no,
okay,
no.
okay.
What I said was, they've programmed $5 million as a contribution to categories of fund balance that are going to be used for some purpose in the future. And what I indicated, that you also happen to be the beneficiary of a very good year.
So you were countering their argument of needing to do that by saying we had a very good
I'm
year.
not countering, I'm only saying.
Suggesting.
No, what we.
Commenting.
That's a good word. What we commented on was that we said that because you were the beneficiary of these funds, and you want to try to keep your baseline budget the same. What do I mean by that? I mean, you don't want to see the budget go from 896, I did remember, 896 to 950, 980, you know, 2 years from now. If you can set aside monies that would meet what you believe is going to drive that baseline budget up. It's almost like your own household budget. You know, you take your little envelopes, you put your cash out. My mother used to do that. Put the cash in the envelope because she knew she was going to have an expense coming down the road.
But I'm going back to
Sort of like that.
I'm going back to the 5 million and 6.8 million. To me, it's almost like when you're saying keeping the baseline budget, what you're really saying is you want to keep your tax level high, even though you're giving these people a supposed 5 million or 5% tax break. We don't want that to go too low because of the 2% cap.
No.
So we want to keep building up. Let's put some extra things into that budget that we usually would get out of cash reserves every year.
Legislator, I didn't say that.
No, you didn't.
No,
You would never say that.
what I'm saying is, you don't want that property tax to spike 2 or 3 years from
Of
now,
course not.
okay? When you have the availability of fund balance, that you perhaps can segregate to offset, to
But
mitigate
that's not
the
what we're
need for that going.
doing here, correct? We're not segregating fund balance. Instead of taking from fund balance, we're adding on to taxation. So we get our taxes higher. We're gonna get the money to spend on these capital projects, like equipment or anything else. Instead of getting it from our cash reserves the way we always do, we're gonna put it into the budget this year and tax the people to get the money. That's what we're doing. And by doing that, we've increased our tax base, so when we give them the break, we don't bring it down too low.
Mr. Poor, you had a comment?
Yeah, a couple of things.
Come on up.
To put some things in perspective. As Nick said, we've had a very good, healthy year this year. Okay? Does everybody forget what we just went through? We actually couldn't hire people. Where our sales tax revenues went down $22 million 1 year. So what we have now is through years of script. Matter of fact, even before Newhouse got here, you get the legislature and the executive then was using water fund balances to balance their county budget and other things. There were reserves in the insurance area that were drawn down to balance the budget. Well, we've come a long way since that time. And we went through some very, very difficult years, particularly through the pandemic, where we didn't hire people, where we were talking about possibly layoffs prior to doing that because we couldn't balance the budget. So now we are year one where it's better. So what are we doing? What we're doing is looking at all of the cuts that we sustained through those lean years and trying to build back a normal, solid, healthy budget to anticipate things that will be coming down the road. Talk about the $3 million contingency, it probably should have been $5 million, but now we couldn't do that, but this year we can. So let's put it in there, and then maybe next year, the year after that, we may be able to draw against that money. And as a matter of fact, this budget does reduce taxation, reduces property taxes, $7.5 million. Can't reduce the sales tax, we want to, rather have the sales tax come into, take the burden off the property tax. So what you're seeing here is a budget that's very solid. It is, I wouldn't hate to use the word fat, but it's healthy. Flexible, healthy, but it sets you up for the next couple of years, depending on what's gonna happen, what's gonna come down the road. I don't have any confidence in the economy, okay, personally. Read the journal every day, look around, see what's going on, listen to the reports, listen to the politicians, but quite frankly, we have to assume as administrators that we need to prepare for the future, whatever that future is gonna be. So what you see here is for the first time in a long time, at least during the Newhouse administration, where we have a healthy budget. I call it healthy and not fat. And I'll just give you one more again, because I'm one probably, except for Jimmy and Barry and the old guy in the room, maybe too. Remember back in the 1980s, first introduced.
That's
the
why
sales-
I know everything.
That's right, good. Back in the 1980s, people moved, governments moved to the sales tax. We moved to it in the 1980s, 1%, than what we have now. But Ulster County instituted its first sales tax, and it was such a winner for them. They had 3 hot shops along the freeway, generated tons of sales tax, more than they expected. What did they do the next year? They cut their property tax down to 0. What did they do the year after that? They raised their property tax up to where it was. So this is a cautionary, building for the future, healthy budget, the kind that we haven't had an opportunity to enjoy in the last several years. That's my philosophical wrap around
Thanks.
the what this is. Thank you.
Mr. Brescher, you had your hand up
Yeah,
a long time ago?
I'll echo what Harry was just saying. I mean, we're sitting here, if we start depleting our budget, and our budget, you know, it's not like we're spending everything every year, or just taxing and taxing and taxing. We've got the lowest, or the highest bond rating we've had in years. We've always been below the tax cap since its inception. You know, every year, that's the measuring stick, or i.e. the barometer for the state of New York. And other counties should look to Orange County, what we're doing here. I mean, we're in the best shape we are. You start depleting all this fund balance, which is basically, Mike, it's in the budget and it stays there. And if we build it up more and more, we're not just taxing the same money again. It's like a reserve. I mean, if we start depleting it, that's when we're gonna get in a situation like we were in 2014. And before 2014, the county was always in very good shape. I'll tell you that when he was county attorney many years ago. You know, if we start picking and picking and picking, we're gonna really be screwed up here. I mean, we budget properly, like health benefits, for example. We budget for the family plan for those unfilled positions, which is why. In Village of Montgomery, I didn't do that until a year or 2 ago. And I got hit with two family plans, single plans, they wanted to go family plans. So that was a nice spike for Village of Montgomery. So now, henceforth, I'm gonna put in for the family plan, like the County of Orange does. But, you know, you start picking and picking and picking, say, talking about taxation. The state of New York is the place where they spend it, all the money that they have. And they mandate to us, so we have to spend more money. That's the place we shouldn't be looking to. We should be looking to us because we set the good example for the rest of the state of New York. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think the public as well as the agencies look for stability, and I think that's where we're at. Mr. O'Donnell, and then we need to wrap this up, because it's almost 5:30.
So you said $50 million extra in sales tax. So
Yeah, actually 57
57, that's my argument, even that.
in 2022.
So you weren't happy with 57 extra $1 million, you had to throw another 5 into it to get there, with the surplus. All right, that's our point. Right? You went up 57 million, you didn't need to put the extra 5 in there, right? Or Michael's point for the little extra boost in taxation, but we'll get to that when we look for adjustments. Right. One other thing, you mentioned a bond rating. I think I read today, our bond rating stayed the same. What happened? I thought it was going up.
Well, we have a positive outlook.
We had hoped to go up. We had hoped to go up.
We had a positive outlook on
We
our
had
bond rating. And Rudy's like me, is uncertain about what's gonna happen next year and the year after that.
No, we got all the surplus, I thought we were gonna get a boost.
The numbers
If you-
I was disappointed when I read we stayed the
It's been
same.
going up.
Right? Yeah, it has been. I thought we expected it to go
But
up.
it still said we were in a strong fiscal.
Yeah,
It was a very good.
well, it doesn't say we're sending money, verbiage. The numbers say-
Finish their presentation.
All right,
Thanks.
you're welcome. So you guys basically done?
We're done.
Are you done, or you were up to page 64 and you were gonna make some profound statement?
Well, no, page 64. I don't know about profound, but we've given you a history of your fund balance from 2017 and where you're at now.
So Lee,
Okay.
so am I reading the bottom line correctly? That's ever since I've come here, and I don't know if it was ever voted on before I got here in 2010, but it's always been, quote, an unofficial minimum of 7% that you want to keep as reserves, just to be on the safe side. So that's what the 51 million here was based on the 51.572 million based on the 2022 budget that you've looked at?
Correct.
So that would have been the safe minimum level
That's your floor.
floor that this legislature has always wanted.
Right.
Okay, and based on the 23 budget, what would that number be based on your calculation?
Oh, it'd be in the 60s.
in the,
roughly.
okay.
Cool.
It's 7% of the overall budget?
686.
6.8 of the what?
Oh, it's a general fund piece for that.
Well, it's the general fund piece, but you know, in retrospect, now that we think about it,
Uh-huh.
you know, Valley View
Uh-huh.
is now starting to
Because you backed out,
deplete fund
you
balance. We backed out
Valley
Valley
View
View.
on one of
I know.
these, on one of these schedules that I looked here. But you didn't back out their cash when you backed out their their expense side.
No, we didn't take into consideration their net assets that are still available as part of the 7%.
So you probably want to back that in when you're doing that calculation.
Well,
for
I
seven.
think going forward, we have another year to look at Valley View and see how it's performing. You're gonna have to give consideration to having funds available for backstopping Valley View's operations.
Well, not really, because they've got, you came up with the 31 million, but I think Ledoux was here last week and said that their current fund balance was at 45 million. And,
Yeah, but
So-
We're backing out 2 years ago.
we're backing out 2 years of use of.
right, you're backing out more. He's telling us what the current is. And I agree with you. I said if it's a new normal, that
Right.
place has got to operate differently. You can't keep taking 13, 15 million out
Right.
every year. But back to my
Or we might
question.
have to sell it.
Back to my question. 7% of the overall budget?
7% of the general budget, which also includes contributions to the various funds, like debt service fund and whatever. Yes,
So what would that high level number be? 860 something million?
have it in the appendix. Just a moment.
Yep.
General fund is 513, excluding social services, but social services should be added in. How many hundreds of millions?
It's
220 for social service?
Yeah.
Okay, And so-
That pretty much brings you to almost.
so 733 is that number, and 7% of that is 51 million. So we're back to the same number that we've got this year.
Yeah, if you look on page 59, everyone, in the spiral book, you look at the column that says 2023 recommended budget. You can see the total budget is 896, and basically all you would take off that total budget, my opinion, is the 56,480,000. Everything else stays in.
Okay, so 896 minus the 55 million roughly.
Yeah.
And so that's 841, and the minimum that this legislature wants to keep on reserves based on our policies is 7% of that, which is 59 million,
60 million.
60 million. Okay, fine, great, thank you.
Ms. Patel?
On the, you're talking the unofficial fund balance unassigned, not including our reserve accounts, correct?
Correct.
Correct, okay. And then, you know, we're going back into what we were talking about with this 5 million and so forth. I had a very lengthy conversation following our last Ways and Means meeting with both budget and finance. And one of the things that we talked about, and I again reaffirmed it today with Deb, is about our assigned reserve accounts and how to make them more robust with the fund balance of taxation that's left over from year to year to year, and put them and assign them into these reserves so that we can protect ourselves against these unanticipated expenses or even anticipated expenses if you have equipment that you know is going to need to be replaced within 10, 15, 20 years, the same way we did in the municipality. I'm also was told that those reserve accounts are still able to maintain the same interest rates and be invested, and that money still retain interest. But I was also told that the time to do that is when we're wrapping up our budget year. So i.e. somewhere in the beginning, first quarter of 2023, when we're wrapping up 2022. And I understand the planning for the future. That's part of our planning for the future and protecting ourselves and protecting the taxpayers and not having to jump tax dollars because we have these healthy reserve accounts. But to leave the money just there unassigned in that, so far over that 7%. And then on top of it, put in cushions. I mean, Jimmy, you said it at the last meeting. There's money hidden all over the budget, has been for years. I mean, it's been talked about by the
I can't
taxpayers.
even find it all.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's a cheat sheet somewhere,
Jimmy,
but, you know, I get where we're going with this. So I'm gonna say that when we're done with this budget for today, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a motion to remove that $5 million because we can take that, and instead of having it as part of new taxation, and take that from our reserve next year when we're closing out the year and help robust up those reserve accounts in that manner. Because that was what I was under the anticipation as when I last week heard it was that it was coming out of surplus, not out of taxation. So from last week to this week, it went from surplus to taxation. And I get planning ahead, Harry, and I know about the tax cap. I've been dealing with the tax cap when I was on a town board. And I understand it's indexed to inflation and so on and so forth. But we're not just dealing with that here in the county. Every taxpayer who contributes every penny of tax, whether it be in property tax or sales tax, here in Orange County, is also having to face that in their homes and in their budgets and making decisions. And not to mention our senior citizens who are leaving because they can't afford to pay the rent or pay their mortgage or pay their taxes and pay their medication and eat at the same
Just say
time.
one more thing, you've got labor unions, every contract is expiring.
I see that, but I'm saying that 5 million and then some of the other money that I know is in here with how many millions we've got in funded positions that are unfilled and that we're having a hard time filling, and we're creating 70-something new positions in the budget. It's just, when do we say enough? Where do we hold the line?
Never.
That's the question.
Okay.
And I think that's what we all have to decide today.
Okay, and then you also have, when you're healthy come the past, you're able to live through COVID better than any other county in the state. So if the funds weren't there,
No, I
you would have been
understand.
up Schitt's Creek.
No, I understand it. That's what I'm
Under
saying.
COVID.
We have reserves and we have ways to protect.
There's 7 seconds delay on this live stream.
Yeah, well, that's too bad, sorry. Okay, so gentlemen, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Very informative.
You have
Thank
any
you for all your hard
questions?
work.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, we'll be here for a few minutes more.
Thank you, sir.
All right?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so we're done with the presentation. Again, review and vote on amendments proposed by O'Connor Davies. I mean, we're not going to go through and go page by page and do the recommendations. We're in the same ballpark generally with their report as the budget as presented. So we could skip that. We can then go now on to 3, which is the review proposed changes by statutory committees and votes. This is the page right here for questions, presentations, answers, recommendation. Mr. Cheney.
To Legislator Hines' point earlier, there are 3 projects from DPW capital projects that have been moved from capital plan funding to other sources.
Which is at 6 point whatever million, I believe, right? At least that's a portion of it. Because I
No, these totals here are much
Yeah.
smaller.
Yeah, it's
That
sur-
was where.
it's pretty much surplus in ARPA.
Oh, it is. Oh, if it's our.
One's ARPA.
If it's ARPA, then I'm doing.
Which section you're referring to?
The bottom,
The bottom piece, okay, because I
so
counted,
it's the bottom
I was
3
counting
projects.
4 down there, so I was wondering what the other 2.
Well, those are capital plan adjustments.
Right.
Okay.
But what we're really talking about now, Deb, is the top of the sheet. Who's here to explain those, or do we need to?
I can explain it. They came out of committee.
Yo,
So So these adjustments came out of committee. The first one came out of public safety. They wanted to increase specialty payments by $10,000 for a recruitment effort. Contracted mental health was $162,000, and that's based on some apartment, some additional mental health needs for some specific people. Beaver Dam Lake, there was an additional, they wanted to increase their surplus and increase their user fees. And at the end, the last one, I put in the property taxes in the additional departments. I decreased it in undistributed, and I increased the interest in earnings surplus.
All right. Questions from committee members? I was going to say, so if there's no questions, we need a motion to approve of these changes that were developed through the committee process.
Second.
Second, Totel and Hines. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, carried. Also, I have again, before we get to the capital plan adjustment, Doreen, can you hand this out from Mr. Fagione? You'd like to add another capital project? And again, this is, again, as typical with a capital project, it's an idea, someone's idea for a project. And this would just add it to the consideration for funding for 2023. And again, this is at the start of the project. And of course, like we always talk about, we get other bites at the apple for any of these capital projects.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. These were put all into packets based on everyone's recommendations that they were going to have.
Oh, okay.
If that's okay, I can hand it
Yeah,
out in that manner.
hand those out and then we'll just pull the last page. That's,
Thank you.
for now, this is the last page. Again, this is a park upgrade for the Orange County Harriet E. Space Recreational Park in Deer Park. The consideration is for such upgrades will include ADA bathrooms, refurbish the pavilion, possible hiking trails, kayak and fishing access to the Neversink River. The proposed budget project would be $1 million parks project. And it's called, again, the Harriet E. Space Recreational Park. So we would add that to this, and again, of course, it would be designated its own project number. So this would be to be included with project number 123, 32, 35, and 43. Mike A.
Thank you, sir. Just so I'm understanding this correct, this is just adding another capital project. This is making no modification to the budget at all.
No, no.
Thank you.
It's just
And it'll
adding-
go through the capital project process.
Correct.
that we-
It's just another idea for a project for a park.
All in favor of the idea.
Okay. Any other
Do we need a
questions?
motion?
I will make
No,
that.
wait.
Sorry.
Questions? Any other questions? Mr. Fagione?
Chairman, I just want to say thank you for your consideration in this matter. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. All right, I'm not hearing any questions. Mr. Paduk.
Yeah, just keep adding to this capital budget. Why isn't some of that $6 million that been added by,
No, it's not.
not the same?
Not the same. This is strictly a concept, right?
Oh,
at the moment.
concept, okay.
It's not in the budget, Mike.
Fine, not, right.
Yep, just a concept. All right, Mr. Cheney, your motion is in order.
Are we gonna do a motion for this
Motion
project?
to accept it.
Motion to accept this project as a capital project.
Second,
Second.
Ms. Hotel. Okay, so that's all in favor of adding this project? Aye. Opposed? Carried. So now, capital plan adjustments. We have the five of us in front of us. Again, like I said, we have 123, 32, 35, and 43. Are there questions on any of these capital plan amendments?
Which ones are these?
They're the ones at the bottom of the page.
Right, okay.
Okay, Ms. Tortel.
Yes,
project number 123, is we're adding that back in, it was removed, or what?
It's just a retitlement of the project itself. It was originally renovations. After speaking with your legislative attorney, we decided to retitle that as a canine facility project in case it's being rebuilt or something like that.
Okay, so this was already through
Yeah,
physical
no, that's
services.
there.
District?
I
Okay,
just wanted to
thank
make
you, I
it
just
clear,
wasn't
yeah.
sure, because I remember.
Okay,
seeing
yeah,
that
these
one.
have all gone through the committee process, and
That's
these
right.
are what have come out of the committee process
Okay.
for the capital plan.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
No further questions.
Any other questions? Okay, so now another motion, Mr. Cheney, for approval of these capital
Changes to the
changes.
capital, for changes to capital projects as noted.
Thank you. Second, Ms.
Second.
Tortel. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so now we move on to the review of the proposed changes, additional changes. Let's call it that way, number 4. All right, Ms. Benelli?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, after sitting with leadership last week and the auditors, we had a very healthy discussion. And it was apparent that there was a willingness and an interest in reducing property taxes even a little further. I want to applaud all of the comments that were made today. I think Nick and Chris did a wonderful job in presenting their report to us as well. I also want to thank our finance and our budget department because they worked very closely with us as well. And, but it became undeniable that, you know, we are in a very unique situation. We've heard it, it's very, very unique. But the challenge that we face is to be very mindful that we continue with a stabilized balance as we go through the next few years. You've heard it being said that, you know, we don't know what the future is going to be. Even your economic forecasters, they can't really predict a lot of what's going on here. Legislator Brescia brought up some very, very good points in, as far as from a budget standpoint and how to manage a budget and keep it stable so you don't have those types of spikes. Legislator Tortel had a good understanding as to what we're trying to transition into as far as looking at those capital reserves and targeting that money as far as fund balance is concerned. However, I do think that there's some wiggle room there. And therefore, I would ask this committee to give some serious consideration to a reduction in property tax. I think that what I'm proposing may answer some of the questions that some of you had throughout this session this afternoon, and maybe some of the other things that haven't even been answered or asked by our other legislators. So I am proposing that we reduce the property tax by $2 million. And after working with budget, I am looking to, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I am wrong here, to increase the interest in earnings line by $750,000. And to make up that difference, I'm also looking at reducing the interfund revenue line, which is account 9901, to $1.25 million. One of the concerns that I had, as much as I'm sure all of you have as well, is the impact that it would have on the tax cap. And I have been assured that it would not be a detriment to our tax cap moving forward into the 23-24 budgets. So that is a proposal that I would like you to consider. I don't sit on the committee, but if,
Do you have that in a form for?
what do you mean?
Yeah, I was trying to keep up with everything.
No, I do not have it written, but I can tell you real quick, it's an increase of $750,000 from interest in earnings. And that you will find on, I don't have the budget page. But you'll see it on the charts that were presented in movies. And then the other is a reduction on interfund revenue, which is account 9901.
And that's the amount that we
And
were
that's
talking about, was
1.25.
one of the $5 million
That
was one of the
pots.
5 million.
Correct.
Okay, you said 9901 was how much?
9901 reduction of 1.25. And Deb, if you want to
Yeah, can you chip in?
refer them to interest and earnings.
Okay, so that would be under undistributed 99001, and that account would be 42401.
And that would give you a property tax deduction of $2 million.
Just a point of order.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Paduk.
I sat there the other day and I couldn't make a motion because I'm not on the committee. The chairman.
I'm not asking you to, I'm not making the motion. I'm asking somebody on the committee to make it.
I'll make that motion. Second.
Can I just ask a
Absolutely.
question here? Okay, so when we were going back and forth with the accountant, we were talking on page 520 to 5 million. And it was, it says 230 debt service fund, 5 million. That's the account that we were talking about, but the account the chairwoman is proposing is 9901.
So that's the appropriation for it. Some of the accounts in here, it's a little different with the funds. So that is the appropriation, 9901, and that account number is.
You just said 42401.
No, that's interest
That's
and
a different
earnings. 68. I have the account, it's 68542. I think, but I'll have to get you the account number because I don't know it off the top of my head.
That's fine, but so these revenues, interest and earning and 1.25 million are not the same as this line that I'm referring to on page 520 in the budget book, correct? Separate, different?
Correct, so interest and earnings would go right into the undistributed account 9901.
Okay, so none of this is off of this line here.
Right, but the 1.25 is gonna come off of the 9901. So they're kind of two different pieces.
Right, but they're not on,
Into two
right, they're not part of this page that I'm referring to here. Okay, great, thank you.
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Chairman,
Madam Chair.
the sentiment that I've been hearing from legislators is they wanted to see a deeper property tax cut. That was how I approached this. As far as looking at specific line items and $5 billion here and over there, I just went for where can I cut $2 million and how do I do it? And this is what I came.
So
I hope that
motion by
makes it
Mr. Cheney,
simpler.
second
No,
by
motion by
Mr.
Mr.
Hines,
Hines,
second by Mr. Cheney. Okay. Further discussion on these line items? Questions? No?
What,
Roll call.
what does that do to the tax levy?
Goes down 2 million.
Reduces it 2 million.
Do you have a percentage?
I don't have the tax.
It's gonna be about another 1.5% on top of the 7 point something that's
Probably,
already
but
done.
I don't have it, I didn't have.
It's within that range, yes.
Roll call?
Doreen, roll call?
Anagnestakis?
Yes.
Russia,
Yes.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Hines,
Yes.
Hotel,
Yes,
Paduk,
Yes.
Cheney,
Yes.
Benton.
Yes.
Motion passes all in favor.
Thank you, everyone. Mike A.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I applaud the chairwoman for working with the budget department and listening to the sentiments of the legislators and coming up with the 2 million in savings for taxpayers. I voted for it because I fully agree with it. But I think there's more there, and I'm going to make a proposal in a second. But I think we're privileged because we actually have a legislator here who is on the other side of the fence. So when he's saying, he did everything in his power to hide money from us, that's what the game is. And so the accountants, by my reckoning, gave us low-hanging fruit of 36 million. The interest, the contingency, the FMAP, the capital funds, the transfer of 5 million for the capital projects, 36 million was low-hanging fruit. God knows how much more is there because you don't know how much is built into the benefit packages and everything else. So there's plenty of other places we could go, but I'm going to concentrate on one place. I'm going to make one proposal, and I get it if it doesn't pass. This wasn't pre-approved by the executive, and it wasn't talked over by leadership. But I think the taxpayers can get more, and I'm going to focus in on one line item, and that's the interest line item that the chairwoman did increase by $750,000. But just to put in perspective, so we all understand, the budget department had budgeted 1.7 million. There's an additional 750,000 of interest. That means we are now budgeting something just short of $3 million of interest, okay, on $280 million of reserves that we have right now. And if we're running at a surplus, by the time the end of the year comes and the beginning of the year starts, we'll be at 300 million. But I get 75 million is ARPA, but we're not spending it on day one, so it could earn interest. But I'm not blaming anyone in budget. I think they did a good job in finance, because just looking at, give me 1 second. And you said you put the budget together, or you were giving CD rates as of September. And I think you gave us like a what did you give us for September? 2.83. And if I'm just looking at rates back in September, so in the beginning of September, rates were right around the 2.8 mark. And throughout September, they went up to around the 2.9 mark. So you're right in the ballpark in September. The problem is, as we stand here right now today, short-term rates are 4.05%. And tomorrow, they're going to go up an additional 0.75% when the Fed increases rates. And they will go up to 5% or more by the beginning of next year. So I'm not going to try to budget 5%, and I'm not going to try to budget 4%. And I'm just going to do what we're doing right now, which, if I heard correctly, you're using rates at around 3.5% right now. Well, 3.5%, and I'm not going to assume we're going to earn interest on the 280 or 300 million. I'm going to assume we can earn interest just on 200 million of that. So that comes up to 7 million of interest, as opposed to the 3 million that we just increased the budget to. So there's an additional $4 million that I'm going to make a proposal in a second. And mind you, I think you're going to earn on the accounts next year well over 10 million, probably over $12 million of interest. And you know it, you're sitting there right now and you're smiling because it's a good thing for the county that we earn that interest. But that's what we're going to really make. So you're going to come next year and say, oh, we had a great surplus there, well, unbeknownst to us. Fine, do that. But there's more money there that we can take, and I'm going to make a proposal that we increase the interest line by $4 million. That brings us to 7 million budgeted for interest, not the 10 or 12 or 14 that we're going to earn. 4 million increase in the interest. And what I want to do is I want 2 of that $4 million to go back to the taxpayers and lower the county property tax further. And I want the other $2 million to be reserved as a hazard pay to our employees once we determine who is eligible and who should be getting that hazard pay. We've talked about that and we refuse to move on that. And so here's a way to do it without depleting reserves, without increasing taxation. We'll put it there as a hazard pay reserve, and let's start working and figuring out who gets that. So proposal is to increase the interest rate that we earn by 4 additional million, have 2 million of that set aside for hazard pay reserve, and 2 million of that to go to lower county property tax. And I hope someone seconds that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay,
Is
so
that one vote or 2 separate issues?
That's one
one vote.
Motion.
4 million, 2 and 2. And I'm actually gonna put the Mike and Agnestakis' prediction on a little piece of paper and put it in the mayonnaise jar on my porch.
Yeah, as long as you put a caveat in there that you're not going to earn that interest if you're not putting all your money to work.
Right.
And I'm shocked that people are coming in here telling us we're earning so much interest, because if I did my calculation correct, if you earn 2.17 million or you're projecting to earn that next year based on 2.83%, that means you're only putting $77 million to work. I'm shocked that the rest of the money isn't earning interest. So you're not going to have my prediction correct if the money isn't being put to work.
Okay. And also, just another comment, I believe monies for hazard pay are being considered in the contract negotiations that are ongoing now with all of our entities.
Right, but this reserves the money that we've actually put 2 million, we've reserved it there, and let's do our negotiations and figure it out. And once they figure all that out, if someone says, well, where are we going to get the money from? It's been reserved there. If we never conclude those negotiations and we never determine we're giving anything to anyone, we haven't lost on anything. You're going to have $2 extra million sitting in cash reserves.
Okay. Good explanation.
Thank you.
Ms. Bennell.
Actually, it's a question. First of all, can either you, Deb, or Karen answer, as far as the contract negotiations are concerned, aren't we budgeted for anticipating contract negotiations settling? And that would be part of the contract, so it's already in the budget?
So that would be, I think what you're talking about is if the salary of your bargaining unit is ended in December of 2022, do we put money in there to preserve that for a rate increase for 2023? Yes, that's in there. That's not hazard pay.
No.
Okay, and then the other question would be, 4 million more is a pretty big jump.
No.
And, excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me. So what is that going to be tax cap?
Okay, so basically you've reduced.
Or can you answer it in this?
So you've reduced the tax cap by 2 million. This proposal reduces it by another 2 million.
Correct.
So right now, of course, we're going to be under the tax cap because we're lowering the taxes. But you got to keep in mind that reducing the tax levy will have implications over the next couple of years. So we will
That's
not
what
be
I'm
able to
concerned
meet.
about.
That is what you, yes, that is an implication.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Questions, discussion, Mr. Cheney?
One other question. Legislator Nagustakis spoke about reserving this for a specific purpose. And then said, well, if we don't spend it, decide we don't need to do it, what does it take to get it out of that reserved, dedicated pot of money after the fact?
I don't know the legal implications on that.
Does it obligate us to do it if we put it in as a specific thing?
County executive veto it. He never could propose it.
We can move, we can do whatever we want.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think
come back to
we could move it whenever we
legislature.
would want.
Like any other month.
Ms. Sawchuk?
In response to the reserve, if we structure it that it's not, you have to structure it with wording in the reserve account, or when you establish it, that it is for X, Y, and Z. So we can add in a clause in there that it can have a sunset.
You don't even need to add it.
You don't even need to add
You just
it.
change your mind and you move it.
Yeah, I mean, you can, but I was under the impression that once we established a reserve account, that, at least when I was on town board, it was a little different, and I know we had this discussion going back and forth last week also, that once you establish it, then you had to have permission from the state.
I would think it would be from your, no, not always the state.
But you said ours was a little different, our regulations.
You could come to the legislature and move that money.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to go through the state.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I understood.
Okay,
Yeah, just to clarify my point, and I'm not sure the word reserve was the appropriate
I
legal
think
word,
maybe
maybe
assign.
designate or
Designate,
assign,
assign,
okay?
yes.
And then the
its own little bucket.
exactly, and the legislature has jurisdiction over that money, just like it does any other. When it comes here, we vote where we want to move it, what we want to do with anything, if nothing comes of giving hazard payout.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Mr. Hines?
Yeah, I'd like to see it separated out. We did 2 million to reduce the taxes. I mean, I'm all for hazard pay, as everybody here knows. I tried to deal with that in the ARPA money and got beat up on that. So I'll vote for the hazard pay, but we already reduced the 2 million, so. Well, my vote separated out, otherwise.
Can you separate it?
Here's a
You can
motion
separate
on the
the
floor,
motion.
so.
I can if I want,
You have to withdraw the motion.
or I could see how the vote goes and see what I do afterwards.
Correct.
Right?
Okay, all right, roll call.
Anagnestakis,
Yes.
Russia,
No.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Hines.
No.
Tortel,
Yes.
Paduk,
Yes.
Cheney,
No,
Benton,
No,
motion failed. Tied.
okay,
4-4?
4-4.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cheney had sent in communication.
yes, I would like to propose, two things. I'll start with, the operating budget for parks. And, I would make a motion to fund the positions of museum coordinator, which is line item 021295, and 2 new park attendant positions to support the museum properties. Total salary cost $102,261, and total benefits $53,498.
All right, questions, discussion? I'm going to vote for this, but just my comment is that, again, okay, so here we are, Mr. Paduk, we're creating a new position. We're funding it, and we're leaving it to the county executive to fill with his leisure whenever he likes. So again, we're creating a funded position, we're adding it to those vacant funded positions, and we're leaving it up to the county executive to figure out when to go for it. Just a comment.
Yeah, question?
Sure.
Is there an implication to the budget? We're gonna budget this in? We're
Yes.
budgeting it in.
Yes.
And did you give the other half where the money's coming from?
Okay.
Debla, okay. She's co-sponsor on the resolution.
All right, so at this point, I know we've talked about reducing the tax levy. You want to keep the tax levy the same at this? Because what we could do is we could increase the tax in the Parks Department. And then we could probably increase the interest and earnings again. That would be my suggestion, to keep it flat as of the reduction of the 2 million.
Yeah, not impacted the tax levy.
Okay, that's what you want, okay.
Okay, so so we are going to increase interest income by this amount to balance?
So-
Legislator Cheney has to adjust his.
But this is just about
I
what you
agree
just
with what
said.
Deb said.
So we're gonna increase property tax in parks, and in undistributed, I will reduce the property tax and I will increase the interest and earnings.
What is the dollar amount?
155,759.
And
Mr.
just
Cheney.
relative, Mr. Chairman, to your comments, yes, I mean, that's the way every position goes. It's up to the county executive. But at the same time, this has been a focus of the Fiscal Services Committee for at least the better part of 6 to 8 months. And it will continue to be the focus of Fiscal Services Committee for as long as I serve. And it will then have the money in place to support these positions, and we will be working with the Commissioner of Parks and look to see this happen at an appropriate time.
My comments were not in opposition, as I said.
I know
from the
that.
beginning. I'm just laying out the playing field as to what's actually happening. Mr. Nagustakis.
If I may, a quick question to the sponsor of the resolution. So
Absolutely.
I can determine how I'm going to vote. Why did the executive not put this into his budget?
It was apparently in and was taken out at some point. I'm not sure whether it was Mr. Brooks or not Mr. Brooks. There was some discussion at Fiscal Services Committee when this was brought up, that there was concern that when you go through the process with civil service, state civil service, and getting a test, and it'd have to be provisional. and may not be able to really be able to be filled from their point of view, from the administration's point of view, human resources, until late in the year. So why worry about it?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Further discussion, Mr. Brasher?
Brief comment. I thank Chairman Cheney for bringing this up today. Minority Leader Paduk and I have been bringing this up for months. And maybe we can mention it each month at Physical Services and just ask the county exec for a status on where we are in this. Filling these
Of course.
positions. That's what we'll do, because we're not going to forget.
Nope. All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor as presented?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Carried. Thank you.
Next, yes, this is a capital plan project also for parks. And it's for the Warwick County Park. It's a pedestrian trail and bike route connection to the Appalachian Trail. So the total project cost is $1.261 million with federal funds of $521,000 and a county share of $740,000.
And particular,
That was a motion.
I'll second. Federal funding coming?
It's through transportation funds. So it's considered to be a transportation connector.
So there's no impact on the budget?
It's a capital plan.
It's a capital
Yes,
plan.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a capital, yeah, that's why I was confused, because you gave the dollar amount,
Yes.
so it's not a
It's again,
budgetary,
just like
it's a
Mr.
capital.
Anagnestakis, it's a.
It will enter as a capital plan.
It's a capital plan, but anticipating 1/3, 2/3.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Tortel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Legislator Cheney and I had a brief discussion on this downstairs. One point I was trying to, I think we got interrupted, and I don't think I heard the answer to, was this is county-owned land, but there's Warwick municipal land in between that we're gonna go through, or we're gonna purchase, or?
No, the Appalachian Trail,
No, I'm
the
saying.
specifics haven't been worked out. It's all the land is either controlled and owned by the county or the town
Okay, all right,
to make this connection. And it's about a mile in length.
mile.
And it's wooded territory. So basically, there's going to be clearing of woods and creating a trail that
Yeah.
there's going to be a bit of switchbacking because the trail itself is a pretty steep climb.
This is where you go right over the mountain, like in Bell Vale.
Yeah, no, I'm. pretty
Kind of more
familiar
towards
with-
the Village of Warwick.
I just wanted to make sure I understood the part of it. I, because the capital plan is going to come back for discussion, I will be in support of this, but I just caution physical services to really look long and hard at the dollar amount that's proposed for this project, because for a mile of trail that's not blacktopped and is just, going to have some bushwhacking, clear cutting maybe, and some grading here. Just look long and hard at it, because that's a lot.
That'll be done. It's a capital plan.
And I just want to point out that most of the trails that we deal with, that we spend $1 million a mile, are flat to begin with because they're rail trails and they're clear to begin with. I mean, you have to do some things along the edges, but
And then-
certainly you're not dealing with the type of remoteness that this trail will involve construction.
Do you have there's a lot of Appalachian Trail alliances and groups and stuff like that actually will come out. Hey, not only just give you but they'll start doing the work with you for nothing, volunteer groups.
Warwick is
Yeah.
an Appalachian community.
Yeah.
And the focus generally is on the trail itself, not connections. And this will be a benefit to through hikers because it will give them another access point, a more direct access point to come off the trail and do what they need when they come off the trail.
Yeah, no, I know. We have, DAT goes right through my town.
Right over Bear Mountain?
Yeah.
Okay,
Bear Mountain, Anthony's Nose.
any other discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried, thank you. Mr. Paduk, you're next. You had some proposals here?
I did. I'm actually surprised we're getting this fast, so far, so fast. Anyway,
Now, which one do you want to start with?
We'll start with defunding vacant positions, benefits and costs in the probation department. And I'll do just one of these because probably not gonna get any support. There's no sense wasting everybody's time to go through this whole thing again, over and over like I do every year, if you don't understand why we can do it. So I'm requesting the following changes to the budget: defund vacant positions and benefits costs in the probation department. 568330, which is probation supervisor. Total salary and benefits is $142,296. Defund a principal account clerk, 021949. Total salary and benefits is $79,909. And probation officers is 4 trainees, but the amount wasn't listed, so I don't actually know what that is. So I can't include that. But I just want to read something to you, just so you know why. I've asked every department head and they responded a lot in different ways. But Tim responded in a way that every department head should. It says, reviewing the minority leader producing, reviewing the probation department 2023 budget, the department has a total of 6 funded and unfilled positions as follows, which are what I just went over. It says, I have not requested that any of these positions be filled, and I am very comfortable with the department's current staffing levels. Staffing levels remain in compliance with New York State Office of Probation and Correctional Alternatives age 10 staffing requirements. And if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. So if he's satisfied in his budget for this year, why are we funding these positions that he doesn't need? So I'm making that motion to eliminate the funding, not the position, eliminate the funding for it.
Question.
Mr. Hines.
So you can do that. You have the position, you have to fund it, don't you, Deb?
No.
You know?
No.
You know, my biggest problem is with the 4 probation officer trainees. You have to have experience to be a probation officer, so that's.
Point of order, Chairman.
Hold on,
That's why we
hold on.
created these positions. Because then the person could get a year experience as a trainee and then ultimately become a probation officer. There's several ways that you can qualify as a probation officer, whether it be a 4-year degree.
I know where you're going.
Or on-the-job training, things of that nature. So those positions, I think we have 2 now, if I'm not mistaken. And we created them for a reason, so that we could find, it was hard to find probation officers. That's really what it comes down to, because you need a 4-year degree and a certain level of experience. So if we need to hire one, we may have to hire one as a trainee to get the next level.
I'm not the head of the department. I'm just read to you what the department head says. I don't know.
But he also worked for the county executive, and he's not allowed to say any positions that aren't filled. It's different when you're dealing with a director.
At least he was honest about it. Another departments responded the same, but were very naive and.
So you want to punish the guy who gave you the honest
I'm
answer?
not punishing nobody. Who's punishing him? I just read it.
He's not taking his ability to get staffing.
Anyways, that's.
And the DA told us that the criminal trials are going like crazy now, which is going to result in more commissioners eventually.
Okay, so now we actually technically should have asked for a second before we let Mr. Hines ask his question. So Mr. Vitello's
Second.
gonna second. Are you satisfied, Mr. Hines? Okay. Mr. O'Donnell?
So if I heard you correctly, you weren't including the probation officer trainees because there was no money. So what exactly are you asking us to vote on?
Deb, do you have an answer?
Which positions?
Well, not to that question.
Probation supervisor at 142,896 and the principal clerk at 79,909.
And that's it.
Plus benefits?
That's, I think that's with
That's
that.
both.
That's, yeah, it's supposedly, it says here, those are both added together.
Point of order.
This is motion.
They still
Point of order, I still don't understand what the resolution is. What do you want to get rid of? What is the dollar amount? Where do you want to change the budget?
I believe it's just these 2 lines, right?
Well, but it has to be stated in the motion, right? How much
I
money
think he did that.
I did the amount of money.
And
And
what-
benefits.
He didn't give a total.
and where, if you're getting rid of that, what line items are affected in the budget?
568330 and.
But where do you want that savings going?
It would go back to the general fund.
No, it would go to reducing.
Well, it's up, no, it's up to him. He's the one making the
Well,
motion.
Reduce taxation is right.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go to the general.
Well, he just said he did. Okay, so reduce taxation.
Thank you for the clarification.
Well, I mean, we have to know what we're voting on.
Can I just make a, okay. So in the probation budget, there is $275,000 over austerity, 200 in personal services, 75 in the fringe benefit line. So that exceeds the 222,805.
So there would be no tax savings. There would be no tax
So we
savings.
would have to adjust that.
You would have to increase that number?
So we would probably have to decrease that number. Yeah, because we have that savings
There's austerity
built in.
built into the
There's
budget.
austerity built
But he's got austerity built in more than the savings,
Right, you take 220 off that and you come
which
down to
means
55.
Which means they're really good.
wouldn't be any savings. That's what I just said.
Right.
So if we voted on this, there would not be any tax decrease.
No change in budget.
At all.
I would have to adjust the austerity amount to balance it out.
Oh, okay, yeah, you would have to lower the austerity.
Right.
By 222,000.
To 55,
Right.
Why would you have to do that?
because he's already built in an austerity.
That's how we think it is.
Savings account.
These positions.
Right,
It's because it's a vacant position and that's what that austerity goes against.
Those are the only two positions that are going
I
against
don't
the
know.
austerity?
Honestly, when we gave him the information, some of these positions could still be, filled at this point. I don't know for sure.
Exactly.
Right.
So
I
you're
don't
not positive that
I don't
that
know.
number's correct. Because if I remember, Michael, when you had a conversation with me, what's that memo say? Something about 6 positions?
Yeah, the memo, yeah. Well, that's,
I don't know, sir. I don't know.
okay. Ms. Benelli,
Well, it's really a matter of what do we, I mean, are they in the process of filling this position already and done interviews? Do we have any idea? Because I mean, some of the stuff we've talked about before, we know that they're interviewing right now for a position. So do we have any clue as to what's happening with this one?
At this time, I don't.
All right, thank you.
this is
Mr.
October 24th.
Just another piece of the probation
Hines.
budget. In order to be like a deputy probation director, you have to be a supervisor. And in order to be the director, you have to be an assistant director. We had to get a waiver from the state so that Mr. Davidian could be director, because we didn't have an assistant director. So when you start knocking out management positions, you, one, limit your ability to be promoted, and two, you may not be able to get a director. We had a waiver for Mr. Davidian because he went from supervisor to director, and never was an assistant director because we didn't have one.
you're breaking the chain.
Yeah, so you gotta be careful, is my point, because that position may be very important to someone who might get promoted in the future.
That happens in every single budget we have.
I'm just talking about this particular piece, probation, because I know we had to get a waiver from the state because I said enough, I guess.
Mr. Mike A.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to digest all this. I get Mr. Hines's point, but I also, unless I heard it wrong, heard the letter from this Tim Davidian. I know Tim Davidian. He's an honest, good man. What's the date on that letter?
October 24th,
He's saying he does not need those positions.
for the 2023 budget.
Okay. But even if we do this, I don't think we're going to get any tax savings. But, okay, anyway, all right, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Doreen, roll call?
Anagnestakis,
Yes.
Russia.
No.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Hines,
No.
Total,
Yes,
Paduk,
Yes,
Cheney,
No.
Benton,
No.
motion fails. With a tie.
I'm gonna skip the rest of them, because every single budget we have, so many, you see, you just went through it with our auditors. We know there's so many funding for vacant positions, and I just know that you know the vote's not gonna be there to help support reducing taxation by eliminating positions. And we know year after year after year after year that we fund, we keep vacant, put the money in the bank.
And next, you have one other proposal?
I have a couple of them. You have one next.
So I only have one.
I don't know why that is. I didn't send it. What one you have? Maybe I sent it second. I sent a separate one too.
Yeah, 210? Oh, okay. I thought you said you were gonna do one and then,
he was talking about the vacant position.
okay, so go to where you're next.
I'm asking to eliminate the funding for taxing district libraries, in the amount of $115,000. To defund that, to defund it. The reason being, I know there's been some research done on it. And some of them have $1 million budgets. You know, we're supplementing. To me, it's always been double taxation. I think we should eliminate it. The libraries get enough money to run their libraries, that's for sure. And I know it's a good feeling to help support the libraries, but the libraries are being supported by every single taxing district that they have. So we talked about maybe using some of this funding to go to the ones that aren't in taxing districts. Never heard any more. Put in a request to the person who sent it. Didn't hear anything back, so I'm just gonna leave it as it is.
Wait, why? have that
Okay,
close to
is there a
190?
second?
It's on the bottom.
Wait. Oh,
Right there,
what?
right here.
Is there a second?
Second, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, questions from the legislators, Mr. Brescia?
Yeah, I didn't really agree with this, when we brought it forth over 20 years ago. But it's something we've had, and Mike always brings up some valid points, but, you know, when I was chairman, I did say, let's keep it at the 115, and luckily we kept it there at the 115. There were proposals to increase it $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and I didn't agree with those, so I think the 115 is fair. We've had the libraries come in the past and explain what they use the money for, computers and other programs, and I think it's fair to just keep it where it's at.
And actually, also, there was some email that I remember reading that outlined the number of districts such as the city of Newburgh or Newburgh Consolidated School District, which has their own library and has tax funding coming from everybody's school taxes every year. There's the library, Catskill Ramapo Library District that has certain other areas that they provide funding for. But there was also 6 or 7 municipalities. I was surprised. I remember Chester was specifically one, get no sort of library funding, whatever. So I would think we should think about, they should think about, you know, asking for some money if they, I don't even know if Chester has a library, but I was surprised that they weren't included in any of these monies,
A
so.
lot of the libraries are school district taxations, a lot of them.
Yeah, but they didn't include Chester as the ones that
Chester
were,
was not, yes.
school
and I
district
couldn't find
taxation.
any funding.
so,
I do have a question.
Miss
Um,
Benelli.
I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, Mike. These 6 or 7, did you ever get in touch with that lady? from-
I left a message. and I
Oh,
never heard
okay.
back.
Thank you.
I think maybe Carrie, I don't know if I asked her or not, she was gonna email her to say that I tried calling and we'd like to know what ones are taxing districts and what ones are not. I never got anything back.
Well, we got that, and we got that from Ellen
out.
Russell, right?
That email was sent out.
From planning,
That's probably what I was talking
but
about.
we didn't get, they,
They get any
that
funding.
letter that's signed by, I forgot who it was.
I have.
That should, I had asked that you call her because I think she could have given you more information on how those other libraries were funded. But obviously you decided to just eliminate them.
Okay. Ms. Totel?
Okay, I'm not sure who can answer the question. This is only going to 6 or 7 libraries, or is this
No.
going
No.
distributed to every library throughout the county?
It's cardholders. Right,
Yeah.
Based on- okay.
except for 6 or 7 that are from that planning email.
Okay, because I know
One
like the
is
Highland
Chester.
Falls Fort Montgomery Library, or the Highland Falls Library, I should say, they've been chartered for over 100 years, and they get funding from the town's municipal budget.
Okay.
And I want to say it's like $250,000.
And they get it from
And
that.
they get it from this too?
Yeah.
Okay. So in essence, you're kind of right there with the double taxation, because they're getting taxed by the town on some of these and taxed
So, I mean,
by,
that's why we should eliminate it.
yeah, I mean, not that I don't want to support the libraries, but I get the valid point, there should be another way.
All right. Doreen, roll call?
Anagnestakis.
No.
Brescia.
No.
O'Donnell.
No.
Hines.
No.
Hotel.
No.
Padula.
Yes.
Cheney.
No.
Benton.
No.
7 noes, 1 A, motion fails.
Next.
I'll probably skip these next 2 pages. Just go to the last one, I'll talk about that contingency fund money that Jim, everybody was talking about. Why don't we reduce that by $1 million and put that against the tax levy as well? That contingency amount, there's money all over the place like we were just talking about. So by reducing that, we can reduce the tax levy a little bit more in our good year, our good years, I should say. So my proposal was to reduce that. I don't have that number line here, Deb, but the contractual.
Page
5
20,
million.
that's where I was going. Number 230, debt service fund, $5 million, is that what you referred
To
to?
$4 million.
No, that's not contingency.
That's not
No,
contingency.
not. What number is it?
The account is 9900990001.
Where is it in the?
And that would be on, yeah, I'm having trouble finding it.
Take your time.
Sorry.
I mean, I think it's good enough to just know that it's the contingency account.
Okay.
Right, because I don't think the budget book had the line item on there.
No, I'm sorry, it is 1990001. And that contingency account is. Provision for contingencies.
Provisions for contingency. That's good identification.
So, point of information.
Sure.
So in all the budget books before, that line item used to be put in there as like a contingency against unpaid taxes or something like that is what they used to call it. No?
That would be the overlay for tax.
That's tax overlay.
Tax overlay. Tax person.
Okay,
That's from real property.
okay,
That's it.
all right. And this proposal will reduce it by 1 million,
1 million.
not 2 million? I thought your paper says 2 million.
I was surprised that we got.
Oh, okay.
I said, well,
Maybe it's gift, I tried to make it easy for you.
All right. Doreen,
5 million to 3 million or 5 million to 4 million?
4 million. Roll call, Doreen.
Anagnestakis,
Yes,
Brescia,
No.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Hines,
No.
Hotel,
Yes,
Paduk,
yes,
Cheney,
No.
Benton.
No.
4 ayes, 4 noes, motion fails.
Okay. One last thing, Mike?
do it again with 2 million.
you know, I'm actually, I had a proposal, I want to eliminate the celebrations funding 576820, $300,000. We have money throughout this budget and planning for $50,000 here and there for fireworks, for all different things. This is the county executive's line, right? When the county executive uses this line to supplement whatever he wants to supplement.
Could be something so that, like, the other day, we had the Red Ribbon celebration, if somebody wanted to propose something for that, it could come out of that one.
The legislature has control of that line?
I think, I don't know that there's control anywhere, but I mean, if someone proposed something.
Well, we
that I
have to go
think-
through the county executive to get it. That's how it works.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not in the legislature.
True.
Right. It has his oversight.
Well, that's my proposal, eliminate the celebration line.
And do what with it?
Put it in the legislature.
No, I have a different proposal for that.
Yes. Mike, what's the other half of your motion?
So is that the second half of the proposal?
You want to move it to the
I
legislature?
want to move the $300,000 to the legislative department, right? Specialty
All right, that's,
specialty
I'll
payments.
second that.
Oversee.
There you go.
That's about right.
Does it get a second?
Second.
Yeah, I already did.
Oh, okay.
So it's move it from celebrations, the 300,000 to the legislative.
Yeah,
Which one? The
Specialty
legislative.
payment.
celebrations under the,
We're creating.
Specialty
You can create
payments,
one.
576820, is that what you're trying to do? I'm confused, I'm sorry.
Which 76820?
5768.
Which legislative board?
body.
The board, not the clerk of the legislature, you want the board, is what you're saying. That's where you want to
The
move to.
legislative board, yes.
All right. Roll call. Dorian, roll call?
Anagnestakis,
No.
Russia. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Hines,
No.
Hotel,
Yes,
Paduk,
Yes.
Cheney,
No.
Benton,
No.
5 ayes, 3 yeses, motion fails.
One
more thing?
Yeah, one thing, you can win the email.
Hmm. You have a copy of this? You should have, I think. No.
We were gonna move it to do that.
No,
We were
no.
moving 300,000.
No.
No, this is separate.
This is separate. And if we go into specialty payments, I want to add $210,000 to the budget. We talked about each legislator having the ability to do what the county executive does in regard to his own district. If you want to support somebody, we've talked about it over the years. We've had it in the budget, and we never used it, so we eliminated it. I'm asking to put 210 back, so each legislative district has $10,000 to support celebrations in their communities.
Second.
All right, discussion. Mr. Hines?
Yeah, we did this once, and Antoinette, our counsel at the time,
Mhm.
basically said it's almost impossible to get the money. County exec would have to sign off on it. It had to go through an RFP process. That's why none of it was spent. None of it was spent. We did this once before, and Antoinette, our counsel at the time, maybe Betsy has a different way of doing it, said, good luck, you're not getting the money, and nobody, not one legislator was able to spend a dime,
Procurement is.
based on the opinion of council.
So.
Mr.
I
O'Donnell?
agree that was the process back then. We have a new legislative council and we also have a new county attorney. So I'm gonna vote yes for this pending, then giving it fresh eyes on.
Okay, Ms. Benelli?
The other situation was that wasn't mentioned here is legislative council at that time did work very hard on this. The other situation that we ran into was when we went to general services, who definitely does a lot of these. This is where the laws came out as far as we could not, first of all, we couldn't give it to an organization such as a food pantry under that donation type of situation, but we could give it to the municipality. But you could not give over you had to give under $5,000. There was a lot of logistics with that. It would be a lot of paper. We would spend probably more time in personnel putting all of this together as far as disbursements were concerned. And we had to be very careful. They had to fill out all of these applications to demonstrate what purpose they were going to use it for. And I believe we also had to go back and audit that they used it for those specific purposes. It was very, very complicated. Betsy has already started to look into it a little bit, but and Mike, you worked with me because at the end of the day, it was you and I meeting with Jim Burpo for hours on end, trying to come up with a proposal that would work. And while it did pass, after that, we tried to work on it. And then eventually it actually was eliminated from our budget when we all turned around during the pandemic and had to cut our budget by 25%. It's something that, quite frankly, it doesn't work, and I don't think it's equitable for legislators either. Because there's also a question that a legislator that only represents one municipality, well, they may only be able to give 5,000, whereas I have 4 or 5 municipalities that I can spread the $10,000 over. So there's a lot of logistics to this that on the surface, it sounds great, but at the end, what kind of a contribution are you really gonna make, except you get a photo op? So,
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. We're not really built for member items. Mr. O'Donnell?
I disagree with the photo op, and I'll agree with everything else Chairman said. but I still think we just get a fresh set of eyes on it. And $10,000 in some municipalities means a lot.
It means a lot, right?
Mr. Brush?
Yeah, I'll support this. I supported it from day one, and, I don't think it needs to be as complicated as it was made out to be by legislators. There were legislators that were against this from day one and didn't want it to work. It was barely a majority that allocated that money. Mike Anagostakis brought this to me early in my chairmanship, and then it was followed up by Mike Padula. I'll support it, and I think it can work. The support might not be there today for it, but I'll support it.
Mr. Fadro?
Thank you, Chairman. Some of these proposals tonight have been interesting, including a proposal to cut public safety in the probation department. We've seen across the nation, defunding police has become a mantra for things that are really at the heart of the matter, not only here in our state, but across the country as well. And the last thing that we need to do is to allow legislative pork to come back and take over things here in this situation. This is the type of stuff that the taxpayers do not want to see. They don't want to see this pork. They want to see smart governance. This budget today that we've worked on is a smart budget. This right here is just a cheap way of trying to throw money into your community to make you look like a big shot. I will not support this now. I haven't supported it in the past. This is the type of pork that gives elected officials a very bad luck. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. O'Donnell?
We didn't have no problem putting $1 million into Port Jervis for a park, okay? This is peanuts compared to what we just did your way. And don't be calling me it's pork when I got 4 communities that could put up swing sets for their children and use it for the public good. Has nothing to do with pork. I've given away a lot of money. I refuse to get a picture taken with the people that give the money just for that purpose, right? Because it takes away from your heart, right, in giving them money. All right, so don't be throwing pork at me.
Mike Egg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was there a second on this?
No.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I hate to be a stickler for details. So someone's got to answer for me. 210,000 going to the legislature?
Right, 10 each.
10 each.
Legislative board, yeah.
Where's the money coming from? What's the other end of the equation, Mike?
Going into specialty payments, I don't know what that number is, but we have a whole sheet where it is. I don't know.
Right. Where's it coming from? You're gonna raise taxation?
Increase the interest.
Sales tax. How's that?
No,
No, increase the interest.
Oh, you get it. That's what I.
Increase the interest.
Oh, that increased the interest line.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is increase
Put
taxation in the
4 million
legislative
in
board, and
special.
I'll distribute it, I'll reduce taxation and increase interest.
You're the co-sponsor again.
Really hard.
She's doing a lot of co-sponsoring here.
Well, you could put 4 million in there and split it 21 ways. Okay, Doran, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
I would rather see a program to take this money and create a grant program where it was open and competitive, that it had nothing to do with any of us as individuals, but was a program where things could be funded in communities for their own purposes based on a grant proposal.
We did parks grants back when Mr. Leahy was,
Well, point of order, I don't know, allocating the money does not mean that it will actually go to 21 legislators. It's going to go through the committee process, and maybe we determine that money should be used for the way that you just said.
That's not the way it was stated.
No.
So I take exception.
But I guess I'm asking legal question. Him proposing moving 210,000 for 10,000 for each legislator. I mean, he's not. That's like writing the law. He's not right. He's just proposing monetary movement of 210,000.
No, he's specified in his motion that it's 10,000.
Let me amend it. Let me amend that motion. To $210,000 into, I don't know what line it would go, specialty payments. Specialty payments line.
576820.
Uses grants slash.
Ms. Benelli.
When we went through this discussion before, and here again, on the surface, it sounds great, but you can't just put $210,000 in for whatever. You have to identify if we're gonna create a grant program. And that's why you saw with the NYSERDA money a long time ago, as far as putting in smart lights and all that kind of other stuff, and now we're going back a long time, but you guys will remember that. But up to date also was the Parks Fund. We created a Parks grant type of thing. So you have to identify what you're doing with it.
Okay, I have
All
two
municipal
right?
grants, all municipal grants.
Yeah, municipal grant program, like we
But you
did
still
tobacco
have to
settlement money.
identify
we use.
what, you're gonna have to clarify.
No,
It's too broad.
No.
I can tell
Municipal
you,
grants.
Municipal grant program, you know what? Could have ended up to
If you
500.
say municipal, it has to go to municipalities, it can't go to organizations.
Betsy,
I
comment?
can tell you that I did some research, based on the last time this was brought forth, which was around 2018, 19, and then 20, and ultimately the pandemic happened and the money was cut. The reason why nothing, it was essentially a grant program is how it was set up. There was a form even set up, but then nobody could agree on anything. So there was a lot of discussion as to the guidelines of the protocol that should be decided for this money, but there was never an agreement. Everybody had their own ideas as to how to proceed with this. So that's essentially what happened. It fell apart before it even came together. So
Okay.
if that's an indication for anyone who wants to vote.
And plus, in the last 15 minutes, we've gone through like 6 or 7 different options, ways to think about it, discussions. Mr. O'Donnell, last comment.
Okay,
We need
that's
to get out of
fine.
here.
So I don't agree with the chairwoman on this, that it's gotta be specific. The celebration certainly isn't too specific in the county execs line for giving out money for whatever celebration it is that day. And certainly there's a lot more work to be done, but allocating the money today is just the initial step. We're not spending anything. What we're doing is putting the money into a budget. I'll be for this.
Doreen, roll call.
Anagnestakis.
Yes.
Russia.
Yes.
O'Donnell.
Yes.
Hines.
No.
Hotel.
Yes.
Paduk.
Yes.
Cheney.
No.
Benton.
No.
5 ayes, 3 noes, motion passes.
Huh?
Before everybody
Huh?
I
backs
did have my
up.
hand up before. I
Looks
just
like we
wanted
have
to say
everybody.
something. The minority leader, Bajion, who I respect his
That's
acting.
majority leader.
That's majority leader, excuse me. Majority leader, excuse me, talks about work. I mean, we're talking about, if it were for it, it'd be $10,000 per legislator. We have a state senator, and I'm sure many other senators, that are going around the county and other areas of the state, handing out $100,000 checks pre-election in districts they don't represent today.
Can we get back on?
No, I'm gonna say this, $350,000 in one area of the county, $50,000 for veterans, like there can't be. So, and people don't get ticked off at this because they love it.
That's the member item.
Those checks, Cornwall Fire Department. got
Just
checks
relax.
You know, so,
Okay, Ms. Tortel, you have something because
Yes.
you did not present anything in writing.
I did not, and I apologize, but I wanted to circle back on one item that Legislator Hines said that he would be in support of, and that I know I've been in support of. But in one of the things that Michael, Legislator Nagusakis had said was that he would like to, I believe, increase the interest line by 2 million for the hazard pay, or is it decrease? It's increase, correct? So I would like to make a motion first motion is to increase the interest line, interest and earnings line by $2 million and allocate that money into a special fund for hazard pay based on the discussion of previously and also of upcoming contract discussions.
Second.
Questions, comments? We've heard it before. Mr. Golden.
You know, pardon my interruption.
It's okay.
But I think, not getting to the merits of it, but if you're going to want to have that money available for it, I suggest that you simply make that money in that account available for that. Not that it's going to be dedicated to that or assigned to that. It may be more difficult to get that money out. Generally, when you have restricted funds, you need to spend it only for that amount. I mean, only for that purpose, for that amount. So my suggestion is not to designate it for that, but the clear intent has been stated that that money is to be available for that purpose.
I'll amend that to make
Wait,
it
wait, wait.
available.
Can I have a question for
Hines.
council first? This legislature can move money as we see fit within the budget, am I correct?
That's right.
Every other time we have been.
I'm just saying that to have it as available creates less of a hurdle that we have to overcome in order for me to do that. I'm not saying that it's impossible.
I don't understand how it makes it different than any other line in any budget that we have in this county.
There are municipal rules with respect to how you can move money from one line to another line. That's part of the municipal finance. That's over my head. But there are rules with respect to that as to how you can move that. Terry, you can talk generally about it.
If it's from one appropriation to another, it does have to.
We have to come back to this.
We do, the legislature does it,
Right.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it does, I don't understand your objection.
My objection is that when we were using this for CSEA monies, and we were using it for hazard pay, that it may create a hurdle that would have to be overcome. I'm
By
just
this
suggesting
legislature,
some-
we have money in the budget right now for raises for the 2023 contracts.
Yes,
That's not a hurdle, right?
no, because it's gonna be used for that.
Right, that's this one. If any money we don't spend at the end of the year goes into the general fund,
Yes, it does.
so there's no hurdle. And by the way, the county exec's probably gonna veto this anyway, so.
I don't know. It was just a suggestion.
I just disagree with the legal opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, but I disagree.
Mike A.
I mean, I understand exactly what Mr. Hines is saying, and I agree with that, but we kind of had the discussion before. I may not have picked the appropriate words before, but we came up with a word that we liked better, so nobody has got any problems of any hurdles. I don't think we do, because we're the ones making the decisions, but just in case, if there were, we're picking an appropriate word that makes sure that there are no hurdles. We are designating 2 million to eventually be used if and when we distribute hazard pay to people. And we are the ones that are going to determine that with that money. And if we don't use it, it sits there. It's part of the cash reserves that the county has.
Okay. Doreen, roll call?
Can I just make a suggestion? Where would you like to put this money? And I'm thinking honestly, the appropriate place would be in the contingency account. And I know we just reduced the contingency account, but I think if we put it in contingency.
No,
It's not
No,
earmarked.
no, no.
It's not earmarked.
I'm saying create
Well, it is
a reserve.
earmarked because it has to come, you want to create a reserve.
That's what I just said. I said, create a reserve.
Not a reserve, not a reserve budget.
That
Not a
a
reserve, it's not
reserve
a
is
budget.
different than an assignment.
It's
That's what
budgeted
council
with the
is trying to
purpose
say.
of going for hazard
Okay,
pay.
it's budgeted with the
I
purpose
rely
of
on the
hazard.
experts.
Sure.
The
Budgeted with the purpose of
designation.
hazard.
I believe.
Create a new line.
Right, because if,
The
New
reserve
line,
account is
yeah.
probably what he's objecting to.
Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, because we don't want to put it into reserve, because then it opens up, anyone else can get it for any purposes.
Okay, so
That's why I thought maybe,
Create a
if you
hazard
put
pay
it in contingency, you could reserve, you could
No,
assign it or
I'm-
designate.
I'm sorry, I meant contingency. I don't think it should be in contingency, because then the 7 million can be used by the executive for the other purposes that he wanted to use it
Well,
for.
it has to-
No, I am-
It has to come to you.
let me amend my motion or clarify my motion. I am making a motion to raise the interest and earning lines by $2 million, create a new line in the budget of that $2 million for hazard pay.
Second.
Number for that?
2 million.
I just don't, I just.
No, they have to create a new line.
Create a new line.
Could that go into specialty payments?
Services.
Okay, personal
Personal
services.
services.
Say that, I'm sorry?
I was just saying, had personal services,
Yes.
not cash.
No.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they might have to create a,
Let me,
You can take a,
let me digest this one.
okay.
you can think on it.
Okay,
She
I'll
can
think on it.
create that
She
by
can
the
think
time
on
we
it.
go to our
Ms.
legislative session and vote on it.
Ms. Benelli.
If I'm hearing you correctly, we started off by reducing the property tax by $2 million. Now you want to take $2 million dedicated for hazard pay and add it to the budget.
No.
No.
She said interest on earnings.
Interest on earnings. The interest on earnings was
So,
projected very low.
okay, all right, thank you. So, there's only so much you can do with one line. We have targeted interest in earnings as our previous, where we used to do with sales tax. Are we at a dangerous level right now to do this?
No.
No, I'm not asking you. I appreciate the legislators, but Deb is managing this budget. So where are we at with that?
So we've gone up to about, with little over 3 at this point, I think we're at.
And isn't that somewhere in the range of where the auditors told us on the high side?
No.
I'm gonna bring it back to.
One of the games was set.
Yeah, it's gonna go to
5 point something.
5.15 or 5 point
Yeah.
something.
Okay, so his recommendation for interest and earnings for the 2023 budget is 3.2 million.
Okay.
So we are approaching. what-
We're over it.
We're over it.
We're over.
Yeah, but he thought we only had 100.
Well, and then we have the
It's just
discussion,
280.
I get it.
Well, again, wait a minute.
So increasing it by this additional 2 million would bring it to 5.
So instead of increasing that though, if you have a better idea of, because you're targeting that money, if it doesn't work as far as the checks have started to come in from the state for hazard pay. There is discussion as far as the contracts are concerned in regard to hazard pay, and there may be money in that budget. So would we be better off that once we have those answers, if we need to, then just appropriate some surplus towards that?
That is another option. That's another option.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
I
understand
have,
what you're
I
saying.
also have a $5 million proposal after this.
Can we vote on this first?
Yeah, okay. Roll call.
Can't, one more comment?
Well, no, we need to get out of here. We've had enough of these proposals, honestly.
You ready for these?
Why, it's your job.
Anagnestakis,
Yes.
Russia,
Yes.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Hines,
Yes.
Tortel,
Yes.
Paduk,
Yes.
Cheney,
No.
Benton,
No.
6 ayes, 2 noes, motion passes.
All right, what else you got?
Okay, based.
What I'm objecting to is no discussion, no paperwork like Mr. Paduk. We're making up all these numbers.
Well, some of this paperwork came in at 4:30 yesterday.
Yeah, because we
Yeah, it could have been done by 4:30 yesterday.
All right, this is what we had discussed earlier on page 520 last week. And the reason why I didn't know this until right before this meeting or during this meeting was on page 520, the debt service is the $5 million. I was under the impression, the way it was explained to me last week, that that was coming out of our reserves, out of our surplus money rather, excuse me. And now today it's being told that it's coming out of taxation. I am making a motion that we remove this $5 million from the budget and wait until we have the surplus left over from 2022 and then put that money in the reserve accounts from that. Because this was explained to me that this was surplus, not taxation. And then today I'm understanding that it is taxation money. And it's a cushion in our budget.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman?
So I made a motion.
That's the motion.
Point of order. So you want to take the 5 million out, what do you want the other half of the equation to be in the budget?
Goes back to reducing taxation.
Okay, second.
Okay.
We've already reduced that line by $1.25 million based on the.
That's right. So you have to have a different number.
Well, I asked you about that when she made the motion. I had her on a 9901 account 42401, and this is 230.
So there's only 375 there.
She would do.
Okay, so I'll amend it to 375.
3,075,000?
3,750,000.
750.
$3,750,000 is what's remained in there. Then I'll amend my motion to be $3,750,000 to lower taxation.
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Anagnestakis.
Yes.
Russia,
No.
O'Donnell.
Yes.
Hines.
No.
Hotel.
Yes.
Paduk.
Yes.
Cheney.
No.
Benton.
No.
4 ayes, 4 noes, motion failed.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Mr. O'Donnell?
Two quick things. One is just with the budget, right? We talked about the $50,000 for one line and for human resources.
Yes,
And then another $50,000 line was specifically for human resources,
that's in central fund.
right? So I just want to make a motion that those two lines go out of her budget and go to human resources where they deserve to be. Because they're in her budget, but they're not for her. Therefore, human resources, she got the exact numbers, right?
You just want to move them.
Move them to do what? Money was for consultant, one of them, correct?
Yeah, it's in advertising.
Advertising, for the retention and recruitment committee. But
No, it's not for the committee.
that's what I was told.
Well,
It's for actions taken by the committee, not for the committees.
For
It's-
initiatives.
So in other
If
words,
we didn't have the committee, we wouldn't have those two lines. would we?
you would still have,
Guarantee you, but
if you move, you would have it elsewhere though. Because the monies are in as far as personnel is concerned. So if for some reason you changed, give me an example,
that's fine.
whatever.
That's not how I was explaining it.
But
today,
it's not for,
It's for
but-
them, not for them.
it would be for you, but you're,
Human
yeah,
resources.
yes.
Right, that's all I'm concerned about.
Okay.
So I'll
But
make a
it doesn't-
motion
I
that-
don't want anybody to think that there's expenses to run this committee.
Well, I think it is, but that's another point, we'll be
Well, I
at
don't
the 8
know where
o'clock,
we're-
all right, so. Anyway, I would just want the money in the right department.
That's all.
That's
That's understood.
Yeah. I'll
Is there a
make motion.
second
I'll second that.
discussion? Roll call?
Yes.
Yes. Brescia. O'Donnell. Yes.
Hines.
Yeah.
Hotel.
Yes.
Yep.
Cheney.
Yes.
Ben.
Yes.
And there's a comment, I'm sorry Harry left because he's the one that brought up contracts. So we're in contract negotiations. If you don't think that the unions are gonna know that the county exec is gonna be able to give 7% raises, that we are gonna approve in every department's salary and wage adjustment line, you're mistaken. They're gonna know that. So that's, we've created a new bar for that. CSEA, everybody else has 3.25 in those lines. Management has 7% in those lines. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, motion to adjourn is in order.
No move.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lee. Good